Hello, 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 everyone. I just realized that I had my mic unplugged again, so that was great. I was talking to you for like a solid minute there. Well, it's good that we realized it before we actually started, you know? So that's pretty good. Give me just a second. I'm doing some last minute tweaks. But yeah, good to see you all here. Hello, Rostam. Hello, MH294M. Hello, Pewdie. Hello, Ashish. And hello, Marius. How are you all doing? Lovely to see you all here. I am quickly gonna clean up the list of... There's something going on with people submitting portfolio reviews like twice in a row. I don't know what's happening there. It's probably gonna be a website issue, but interesting. I do not want that to happen. So let me just remove some people out of the queue. Make sure that they're no longer in the queue. Well, whatever. It's okay. We'll figure things out. But yeah, I've been good. Thank you for asking, Marius. Let me switch on over to the camera. I have been good. I have been good. Thank you for asking. I bought Game Pass again. I'm playing some Forza Horizon. So I've been having a little bit of fun just like cruising around. I've not gotten far though. Like I'm literally like 20 to 30 minutes in. I've literally done the introduction and then I went to sleep. So yeah, I'm having fun with that. What else has been happening? Yeah, there's not going to be too much gaming for me this week because yeah, this week I really want to get the website done. I'm planning to publish it like probably Sunday evening or something like that. That is the hope currently. I was doing some stuff on it yesterday evening. Some final tweaks. Well, not final tweaks. There's actually one page that I still need to set up. Yeah. Because it is weird. The stuff that I still need to set up is because we're doing early access, right? So I need to basically set up like a thing explaining early access and what that means and what the perks are of joining up for early access and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, hopefully we can get it all done over the weekend. I'm excited for Summer Games Fest in June. I haven't been excited about gaming for years now, to be honest. Oh, what is different about like Summer Game Fest? Like what changed your mind, MH? And Marius is saying, I'm hyped beyond for 007 First Light. Yeah, interesting. I was looking at a Digital Foundry video about this yesterday where they broke down how the engine works for that game. I've only watched like certain snippets of it because a lot of it is, as you would expect from Digital Foundry, like very tech heavy, right? Very specific technology and all that kind of stuff. But it was a pretty good video so far. Let me see if I can find it for y'all. Oh, hello. So there we go. That was a pretty good video. Again, I haven't watched the full thing because a lot of it when it comes to tech is it has to do with like, you know, how do you optimize for like the amount of lights that you have in your scene? Like how do you do ray tracing at like a performance level? Like how do you make it scalable? And like all that kind of stuff is like awesome, right? It is freaking awesome the amount of technology that goes into like actually making games and the technology behind it. But as an artist, I'm like, yeah, that's like technical mumbo jumbo, you know? Like I don't really care about that stuff. Like I wanna see how the stuff works. So yeah, there was some interesting stuff to see there. Nothing. That's why I skimmed through the whole video a little bit. But from what I can tell, like the majority of the stuff that we actually get to interact with as an environment artist, like it's not out of the ordinary, you know. They were talking about like some of the way that like the editor works and like how the build system works, right? So this might not be like a particular thing that people know about if you haven't been inside of the industry yet. But what happens is you have a whole lot of content that goes into the game at all times because you have like massive teams working on it, right? And then what happens in the background is you have like a server kind of doing, let's say, lighting calculations or automated testing or something like that. It basically, all that data basically gets handed off to a server that then does what it's supposed to do, whether it's automatic testing or building like the lighting data or building the logic of the game, like whatever it might be, right? So that was pretty interesting when they talked about that. I don't think that's like honestly that big of a discussion at all, but it was nice that there were some questions around it, because every company seems to have like their own way of dealing with that and how quick those iterations happen and what that effect has on the development team. So that was pretty cool. And then yeah, I still need to go into like the second half of the presentation, honestly, because they talk about like open world stuff that is apparently in the game. Sorry for spoilers for anyone that cares about that, but yeah, there's some open world, well, not open world, but like larger levels in the game, and they yeah, the optimization for those levels, that happens differently, right? But yeah, I put a link in the chat if you are interested in that kind of stuff, in that kind of technical deep dive. Go check that video out. I mean, I feel like there's more to expect to when it comes to gaming in 2026 and 2027, as it seems like publishers and devs are giving more of what the fans are asking for in general. At least that's how I feel. Huh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. It's weird. I'm kind of a little bit out of the loop when it comes to like the general, like what's coming up and like the big hype cycles and all that kind of stuff. I'm more into like my indie games that I follow now, right? But it is interesting that you say that the devs are giving more of what the people are looking for, because I feel that a lot of the push in the last couple of years actually came from publishers, not developers, you know? Because, for example, what I instantly go towards is then like Sony's push for like live service games, right? That was like a big thing that then shifted over like a bunch of studios towards like, oh, we've got to make live service stuff now, even though we've never done it before because we're a single player studio. Like, what the hell are we supposed to do with this, you know? But yeah. Yeah, on the broader topic, I don't know, actually. I don't know. But it's interesting that you feel that way, though. I'm just trying to think about like what the general sentiment would be, right? And how people feel about that. Because I don't think AAA is massively gonna do anything different. They're still just gonna do, yeah, what they were gonna do, right? It feels so weird to say, but yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think about a couple of game examples, right? Like, for example, like Black Flag is like an interesting example, I think, because there's obviously no proof of this, right? And I have no, this is not coming from like a place where I have like knowledge about this at all whatsoever, but I can see a world existing where Black Flag specifically, they knew that they wanted to bring that back, but they couldn't plan it properly around like the release of Skull and Bones, for example, right? And Skull and Bones had such like a disastrous like development cycle that probably also had like knock-on effects on like Black Flag, let's say, right? Because that's the way that I tend to think about it. Like let's say the broader, like the big cheese at like a big AAA company, they look at their portfolio, right? And then with Black Flag, something like that, they knew that was going to be a good thing. I mean, I don't think I give them all the credibility. Like they're not stupid, right? They knew that was going to be a big thing, but then because their catalog was already kind of built around like Skull and Bones coming out and all that kind of stuff, they couldn't really release it. As one example, right? So that's like a portfolio example, I guess. And then Yeah, the whole big live service push that was kind of crazy and dumb, but it probably also had to do with just like a massive amount of capital coming into the space, right, during COVID, which meant that if they wanted to do like a wild bet, it probably means that you would have to do that within that time cycle, right? Because there was so much money coming in that if you wanted to swing for the fences, that was the time to do it, right? Because now I think what we're getting into again is money is scarce. That means that developers and publishers are going to play it more safe, and that's where we get like, oh, we're going to go to the things that people actually ask for, right? Because that seems to be like the safer bet. Yeah, it's an interesting topic though. I would actually love to do like a deep dive on this and actually go and look at the data and look at like news articles and all that kind of stuff, because I feel like I'm just pulling stuff out of thin air right now and from my own experiences. But I would actually love to sit down and like actually look at, like almost following like a company's portfolio and how that shifted over time depending on what was happening. But yeah. I also want to say, just in the meantime, if this is your first time joining this chat, first of all, welcome. I'd love to have you here. But if you want to ask any questions, feel free to do so in the chat. Any questions about like games, working in games, to being an environment artist, working on game art, anything that you can think of. Or if you want to ask me some questions, that's totally fine. Because I have over a decade of experience working in games now. Most of it has been in AAA. So that's where I just want to throw that out there as like a caveat that like most of where I come from has been like AAA centric. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. Hello, Shitty Podcast. Hello, Andrea. Good to see you both here. Welcome, welcome. And hello, Lily. Sorry, I didn't want to miss you there. Ashish is saying, I'm going to play Forza 4 again because 6 is too expensive for me currently. Yeah, getting it on release for like 60 or 70 quid or 70 euros or whatever it may be. Yeah, especially in a time where disposable income is at like an all-time low, I feel. It becomes very hard to justify like a $70 release, That's why I honestly, that's why I subscribe to Game Pass, because it's 12 euros and you can get to play Forza and then you just cancel after a month, So I'm probably going to be playing Forza for a while. I'm going to be picking up like a couple of other games. I'm going to cancel Game Pass again, and that's going to be it again. That's probably the way that I'm going to be doing this. Andrea saying, it's sort of like indie movies. They tend to create things that push boundaries or try new things, while mainstream try and stay within the blueprint that has been used for many years. And has started to become predictable. Well, it's because they have to get a return on their money, right? It's all driven by the performance of a game, right? Which means like how much a game has a potential to sell, right? If you make a niche game, you reach a niche audience, which then has less capacity to like break out and become like a massive hit, right? Whereas the opposite, if you have like a big studio, 500 people working in it, all on payroll, you have to make a game that has to sell like X amount of money. Otherwise, yeah, you have to lay people off, right? So it is a money game. That's why you see bigger studios become more predictable, just because the market and the games that they're making kind of demands it, right? Because there's no way to make like a big open world AAA game with all the intricacies and all the systems that they come with a small team. So it's like there is still like a large barrier of entry when it comes to especially like AAA open world games, right? Which then means that they kind of need to cater to like a larger audience, which means that they can't be like niche stuff, right? Because yeah, it is very interesting to even see indies that become like really successful, and then they kind of go into the same thing, right? Because let's say you swing for the fences and then create something like Hades, for example, right? Hades did fantastically well. What do you do then, right? Like, what is the next step for you as a studio? Like, generally, as you run a business, right? You have the choice between this is the best game that we've ever put out. Are we now gonna stop making a second one and do something different? Or are we gonna improve and like put in ideas that we had for the first one that we couldn't do and then make a second one, right? Because even that might be seen as like they're sort of playing it safe, right? Because Hades 2 compared to the first one, it has a lot of new stuff in it. But if you then compare that to, let's say, making a total new game, they're still playing it safe, right? So it is very interesting. Yeah, it is very interesting to look at it that way because I feel like it grounds it more, you know? Where like if you have something successful on your hands, are you then just gonna say like, okay, that was cool, but we're just gonna do something else and hope that it works out again? That is very scary. At least I'm trying to imagine it being very scary when you have a team of developers working for you and you are in charge of their livelihood, you know? That's the way that I tend to look at things. Which unfortunately then, yeah, we tend to over-index on like the safe side and make like smaller iterations rather than like trying to add like completely new things to games. So that's like the downside of it, unfortunately. Yeah, Marius is saying this is talking about the presentation that Digital Foundry does about the breakdown of the game engine that they use at I/O for 007 First Light. I like that they shared that sort of info. More studios need to do that. Yeah, it is an interesting one, right? Because there's almost no benefit of doing that really, apart from like having like a small niche audience of people that kind of are in the same position that we are, right? I think the general audience doesn't care about like how a game is made. They care more about like how the game plays and how they feel while playing the game, right? So it kind of feels like I want to see more of that stuff. I agree, but I wonder what the benefits of it, if it is really, because I can't really come up with like a good, with a good use case, if that makes sense. Even though, again, I like that they do it, right? And it's actually pretty bold to also show off an engine, which, again, like the engine itself, it is not made to be a consumer-facing engine, right? What that means is this engine is not to be supposed to. It's not supposed to be used outside of their own studio, right? Which means you can really tell, like by the looks of the engine itself. And this sounds like very, I don't know, very I don't know, very, very targeted against them, right? But it's not supposed to be. This is any in-house engine because they don't have to care about like how something looks, right? Because they know that like it's more about like how it functions and if the team that they have internally kind of works with it, right? But it's not meant to be like the show pony thing where they're gonna show off, oh, like we're trying to attract like new investment or something, right? That's not really the idea here. So it's really funny to see the visual differences between an in-house engine that looks like the one like the Glacier engine, and then compare that to like, let's say, Unreal Engine, right? It's always really interesting. And again, this is not specific to the Glacier engine. Any engine that I've worked with that was like proprietary kind of looked like awful, you know? Like there's certain engines that look better than other ones. But again, the priority for them is not meant to be like a sales thing, right? But yeah, you can look at Yacht Club Games, their new game. They switched it up a lot, and it looks super cool and fresh. Mina the Hollower. Mina the follower. But this is the thing, right? Like at a small audience size, you can do whatever you want because there's no stakes. It just becomes like when you get into like 50 to 100 to like 200 to 300 people, that's when the burden really becomes on you, right? Like at you as a studio lead, as like a studio executive, now it is on your shoulders, right? Because as a smaller studio, let's say you do a successful game and you have Shovel Knight and you have some money in the back pocket, your runway is going to be way longer than the runway of like a AAA studio, right? Because they just have like way more expenses. So it's almost like it's a different league that they're in. And that's why also you're seeing more innovation in the indie space, because they have less to lose, right? And they can be bold with their decisions and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. It is cool. I have not played Shovel Knight, by the way. Not necessarily my type of thing. I always found it looking really cool though. So yeah. Yeah, this is the beauty about like indie games, right? Like there's so many different ones. There's so many beautiful ones. One game that I'm excited to play is the new Coffee Talk. I think I said this like a couple times before. I love playing Coffee Talk. It's like a visual novel where you run your own coffee shop and you just talk to the people coming into the shop. Ah, so good. So good. The Ori guys did it. They nearly failed with No Rest for the Wicked, but they pulled it off. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, studios at that size, like they have to do that, right? I mean, this is the interesting thing about like it's almost a great equalizer in games for the most part, right? Studios have tried to make sustainable games, because what the big issue with games in general, or like from a business perspective, has always been that it's been an all or nothing kind of industry, right? Where if you hit it big, you hit it really big, but if it sucks, you're dead. Like there's almost no in between for like the majority of people, right? So yeah. And I think you can see that across the board, right? Like if the next game from any smaller indie developer like kind of flops, then it's like, yeah, you have to scramble, right? You have to really think on your feet. You have to be really quick. And you have to pivot really quickly. If that doesn't work, you're kind of screwed, right? It's just that sort of methodology like doesn't work at like big scale. So turning the ship around with like AAA becomes really difficult. But yeah. Yeah, I'm really curious where the future of games is going to go. Because I'm seeing a lot of like really cool innovation, right? Like indie games really are becoming, well, have been for the longest time, but are now becoming more of an interest to, I think, the big dogs. What I mean by that is that you consistently see breakout hits like Balatro was a good example, and then you've had like other games in that same genre, right? Where it's like a small game made by one or like a small team, and it's a breakout hit, and it has like a return on that money, right? It is interesting to see. I was watching a video on this, that what companies are doing now, and unfortunately we have to go into AI again. They're kind of using AI as like a pitching machine to like a wider audience. So what they'll do, and I don't have any examples here, but the video was talking about like, let's say Activision doing this. I also know some like smaller companies that have done this, where they basically they have AI generate like an idea for a game. They then use it as an advertisement to see how people engage with it, right? And they maybe have like 5 or 10 like games, quote unquote, out there like that. then they just look at the one that gets like the most interest, and then they actually make that, right? There was a developer, and I think they're still denying that they used AI, but they kind of did the same thing. So they went on Twitter, they had like this 80s like Daggerfall, like I'm talking about old school Elder Scrolls kind of vibes going on, where you were walking down a hill out of a forest and you could see the castle in the distance. It was all beautiful pixel art, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people suspected that that was AI, and I have my suspicions for that too. But they kind of use it as a pitch. People really engage with it because they were like, oh my god, this is the game that I've been waiting for, blah, 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 right? It got like massive amount of traction. And I think they just used that again as a pitch. And then once they had like a really good pitch, they then started executing on that game. And I think it's an interesting way of doing it. Here's a conundrum though. Even if that person used AI, they are not going to come out and say that they used AI, because there is such a pushback against using that in game development, especially from gamers themselves, that, yeah, it's not going to go over well, right? So it's almost like you have to be sneaky, you have to lie about it, and then try to give people what they want. And then once you release it on Steam, you have to declare that it's using AI, right? So then it's like, well, actually, like if you use the pitch, if the original pitch is AI based, but then you never use it again, and you use that as a pitch, and then you use it as a pitch to then make your own game, you don't have to declare that it is AI if you don't use AI in the development process, I guess, right? So that's a way that they get around it. They only use it like insulated for like the pitch, then they just work on it without using AI. Stefan is saying, do you know about the Twitter Monet painting drawing with AI? Nope. I am so offline when it comes to social media these days. I scroll like LinkedIn like once a day, maybe once or twice a day, and that's about it. So I am so out of the loop with all this stuff, because for the large majority, I just don't care, honestly. I just don't really care about it that much. It's too time consuming. I got other shit to do. Like this, helping people getting into the games industry, talking about stuff. We've got more people pulling in now, so it's lovely to see you all. We don't always talk about AI. If you want to ask any questions about getting into game development, we're going to get into some portfolio reviews in just a minute, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can talk about it. Whatever it may be. Beauty is saying like leaks on movies. Not sure. I am so out of the loop with like movies in general that I'm not even sure about it. But like people have been speculating for the longest time that the same thing happens with games, right? Where they leak a game, or like they leak something with a game, and then it's like, oh my god, they're doing some early testing, or they're trying to get like hype. I've always was kind of on that side. But once you're inside the industry and you know how complex, like let's say an international release is for like a well-known AAA game, I am not surprised that honestly like stuff leaks, or that it gets announced like before, and that people get their access some way, you know? Like it's actually kind of crazy like how how much stuff needs to be organized for a successful launch to even happen, you know? It's crazy. Hello, Mila. Good to see you. We are gonna go into your portfolio, I think, in just a minute. So it's gonna be good. I'm excited. Someone shows an AI Monet painting and people go crazy about how bad it is, and then the original poster comes back and says that it's a real painting. Oh, interesting. I mean, Yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't know. I don't know how, that's just like internet bullshit. I think we're, the only interesting thing there is that what really bothers me about it, and I take this stuff like I always go into like the serious like consequences of things, right? I can't really think about like the funny stuff like immediately, because I'm like, one of the main concerns that I always had with AI was like that it would just like flood everything, right? And that people would genuinely start to question like, is this AI or not, right? And because there have been a lot of times where someone makes absolutely beautiful work, and even if I don't want to, there is a voice in the back of my head that says, it's this AI. And that sucks, because even if it wasn't, it is still a part of my thought process now. And I don't want that to be the case. Where if someone makes something really beautiful and they put like their love and time into it, I just want to get to enjoy it for what it is, rather than already have to think about like, oh, how did they create this? Like, was it AI? I need to look at like the small details and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it just sucks. I hate that part of like the thought process now. My portfolio today, looking forward to it, Tim. Let's go. I've got it Friday, nearly missed this. Oh, I'm glad you're here, Emissart. Harry is saying, just a thought I had recently. Do companies sometimes share artist briefs? I've always been curious on trying one, at least, to see what the briefs are, or most recent ones. So that's an interesting one. Companies don't share them, but I have made a bunch of like fake artists, and I want to reintroduce that back into like some of our offering that we do. So I'm hoping to reintroduce that like in the next month, or like maybe the month after, depending on the availability. It's on the list, because I had this whole system where I have, I think, like 5 or 6 like fake artists to kind of test your skills with like a brief that is somewhat non-descriptive, you know? Because most of these artists, like they can get pretty weird sometimes, you know? So it's good to be prepared for that. But companies themselves, they only share an artist when it comes to if you're actually in the running for a position, right? Because sharing an artist also comes with the responsibility of someone taking care of the communication with you and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically they're paying someone to then share an artist and then follow up with you, right? Like that's the whole idea behind it. It's hard giving the artist the benefit of the doubt sometimes. Yeah, I still want to believe that the majority of artists. Here's the thing, like we had an incident on our community as well, right? Where someone's work got stolen. And then you go to their account and it's like not only their work got stolen, but also other people's work got stolen, and then someone's trying to pretend that they have that they did the work and they're trying to get into the industry that way, right? Presumably. What we shouldn't do is like over-index to try to build systems to counter those people, because those people are always going to find a way, right? And the same sort of thinking I apply to like AI. If a person is going to use AI, there's going to be a part of the process where they're going to fall apart regardless, right? Because if you're going to do an artist and you can't pull it off, or I can see that you generated some stuff, it's not going to go well. I can guarantee it. Because there is still a part where you have to bring your own internal like artistic skills to the table, and AI isn't just going to be like a tool on top of that, right? So if you suck at making like fundamentally good art, if you didn't just use AI as a tool for that, it's still going to suck. Or it's going to be average at best, right? But yeah. Exotic is coming into the chat and saying, I got fired recently, so I need to redo my portfolio, but damn, the motivation ain't here at all. Yeah, that sucks. First of all, sorry to hear that you got laid off. That is rough. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, the thing that I would say there especially if you're talking about like games industry or like tech in general, right? The hardest thing about having a job in games is that you can never rest, really. It's such it might sound like a demotivating thing to say or like a harsh thing to say, but if you want to stay in this business for the long time, you always have to look out for yourself first and make sure that your portfolio is always like somewhat up to date, or you have like semi-relevant work, or you're doing relevant industry things that can get you the next job. Because unfortunately, there's just no rest. There's just no rest, right? You kind of have to always have that fire in you and work on the side. Yeah. Yeah, or like I think what is more appropriate actually is, or not that like I don't want to say that you're wrong, right? But it's you have to find a way to keep that fire going. I think that's the hardest part about doing this job, right? Is that because once you get into the industry and you do environment art as a job 8 hours a day, it will become a job, right? It will just become a part of the routine. It's something that you do when you go into work and all that kind of stuff. And then having to break out and do stuff on the side, that is really difficult, right? So you have to keep that fire going. I think that's the most difficult part. It has to be consistent, right? And you can't rely on the company to build your next steps in your career for you, right? Exotic is saying it's okay, was already ready for it, but I think I will aim more towards marketing or advertisement. The field is too rough right now. Yeah, I would say that marketing or advertisement is, well, I don't know. Like, this is an assumption that I have. I don't think it's going to be any better. I don't think it's going to be any better. I would hope so for you, right? But I think just tech in general and this, let's say design or art in general, I think is very, very much in like a very similar position across the board. But hey, here's the thing. I hope for the best. I wish you well. Just whatever you feel like you need to do right now, do it, right? If that is taking a dip outside the industry, doing marketing, advertisement, take a breather, rekindle the fire, do what you have to do, right? Because you have to come first. Coming back from work and still having to work on my portfolio simply sucks, not gonna lie. Yeah, I mean, yeah. There are definitely days where it does, right? And that's where one of the things that I preach is that it can't be about motivation, it can't be about inspiration, because those things are fleeting. It has to be systemic. You have to build a system that you can reliably just keep doing, because that is going to be more helpful in the long run than only doing stuff when you feel like it, right? And I know that that's hard. It kind of makes you sound like you have to turn into a robot. But yeah, if you want to keep doing this for the long time, I think that's probably like the most efficient way of doing it. Because otherwise it's going to be pretty tough. It's going to be pretty tough. Like, I can almost guarantee that if I were to be doing stuff whenever I like them, Beyond Extent probably wouldn't exist. You know? These streams wouldn't exist. There are times when I don't want to do the streams. There are times when I don't want to give feedback, you know? And I think honestly, people can even tell whenever I'm having a good day and a bad day, because I've done so many streams. I think people can tell by this point. And I'm trying to be more conscious of that too, right? But yeah, it's still important to show up. Like, one of the things, for example, for me, what is keeping me aligned whenever I do these streams, right, is I always have to remind myself that this has the ability to change someone's life. It sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds ridiculous, but giving someone advice on how to do stuff, I treat that as like a life-changing thing that can happen. So sometimes I have to remind myself to be like, hey, look, you might be having a rough day. Doesn't matter. You still have to show up for the people that are looking for advice, and you still want to give them the best advice possible, right? So yeah, that's the thing. I think it comes down to like finding a guiding star, right? And kind of using that whenever the going gets rough. A lot of industries are struggling at the moment, that's for sure. Yeah, and I think the time, if we want to put like a positive spin on it, that's where I always go into like, you have to be savvy, right? And I think this is a time period where when the going gets rough, you get to discover a lot about yourself and how you react when the going gets rough, right? And something like there's some really, really good lessons in there. So try to be introspective. Look at the way that you're handling like the day to day, right? Give yourself some slack, right? Don't go all the way all the time. That's not sustainable. But try to recognize like, hey, today I have a shit day. I'm still gonna do work. But I'm gonna do less, and I'm gonna go out for a longer walk, or I'm gonna go out for like, I don't know, like I'll spend more time at the gym, or I'll go meet up with some friends, whatever you want to do, right? Whatever you feel like makes you feel good and helps you take a break. Give yourself like a little bit of slack, you know? Thank you, dude. It means a lot. I worked in events marketing for my last job, and it took me a year to land it just as an internship. Yeah. It is rough. Lydia is saying a lot of young adults can't find work in uni out of here, like even in the IT sector where there's always promised with work guarantee and such. Yeah, I mean, that was always going to be like a false promise, right? Because a lot of that like IT sector stuff, like the hiring that was happening was literally just like companies trying to corner the market, especially in the US, right? But the same thing was happening here as well. And whenever, it's the old age saying of like, whenever something sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? And I think that's what we had with like the promises of like, dude, you can make like 6 figures in the IT industry, and oh my God, like promises everything. It's like, yeah, that's not gonna last, you know? Or it can't last, you know, because at a certain point, like when the going gets rough in like, let's say the broader economy, right? Like companies have to scale back too. But yeah, like Harry is saying, Hesotic, wishing you all the best, man. Like, yeah, you got this. So yeah, be kind to yourself. Do like half an hour of work a day, build that consistency up, but be kind to yourself and make sure that it's sustainable for you, right? Andrea is saying it's gotten so exhausting to prove yourself that you're not you are not using AI by recording your work process. The issue is not the BTS. The issue is not the BTS. What is BTS? I'm not sure. But the additional work that goes into showing your thoughts and work process in the fear of AI allegations instead of just showing breakdowns, at least in my opinion. That is interesting. I didn't know. It's been a while since I've done an art test, right? So I don't... Or maybe, yeah, maybe you're talking about just in general, right? Oh, behind the scenes. Thank you, Andrea. Oh, I see. So it's more about like the general. It's not about art tests or anything like that. It's more in general. Yeah. But even with... I wouldn't go recording like my process, honestly. Like, because here's the thing, right? And this is something that we're going to do live as we're going to go into portfolio reviews in just a second, right? I can tell a lot of things from your breakdown. if I can't tell a lot of your things, like a lot of the things that I want to know as like a company hiring you for a breakdown, I would even argue that the lack of skill is on my side, not your side. Because if I can't recognize if you're doing stuff in the correct way by looking at like still images, even if you have a breakdown, right? Then the burden is on me, not on you. Because then you recording your process is just like explaining the individual steps that you took. But me as a professional, I can look at a final result and I can make a very good judgment of which steps you took to get to that end result, right? If you can't, that just means that you don't have the skill to do that, right? That's sort of the conclusion that I come to. So yeah, I don't record your process. Because here's the thing, right? Like I've tried to record my process a couple of times and it puts like an additional burden to always be performative. Because I'll give you another secret. And this is still true for me this day. Creating things is messy. It's not going to be clean. It's not going to be perfect. And it's not going to be a straight line to the finish. So whenever you're trying to record yourself, you are trying to get that expectation built in, right? Where, oh, I'm recording something for someone. It needs to be good because otherwise, like, they're going to look at me like I'm just like a dumb thing, right? Yeah, don't record. Also, don't have like full uncut recordings of like your stuff on ArtStation. I don't know. That's probably not what you're doing, right? I will say the last point that you brought up, going back and forth within video editing. I think video editing, like just really quick video edits, can be a massive boon to leveling up your presentation for your portfolio. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't record your entire process and then try to cut it up into something that makes sense. The way that I would use things, for example, is I would record a shader, right? What I mean by that is not the freaking material graph. I don't want to see that. I want to see you use a shader and then maybe do some like video editing on top of it where you're like doing shader shenanigans in the background and then you see like how the values change like in a nice cutout or something, right? That's what I'm talking about. Very simple stuff, but it can really elevate your portfolio to the next level. But I don't care about like seeing all the step-by-step stuff that you've done, you know? I think the closest that we're probably going to get is a process GIF, you know, where every day you just take an image from ideally the same camera angle. If it's a different camera angle, it's fine. I can make do with that. But at least that gives me an idea of how you develop things over time. Because again, I don't want to see how you like put this one barrel in place and then maybe you rotated it and maybe you scaled it down a little bit. I don't care about that. I can see that from the bigger picture. Mario Fernandez said, I did my last portfolio piece in my free time and I felt overwhelmed a lot. Yeah. Yeah, it is unfortunately, and it honestly has always been, but it's been exacerbated by like long development times that we still have to do this stuff in our free time. Most of the stuff that's on my portfolio today is stuff that I made in my free time after work. I did multiple ArtStation challenges. I did a ton of art tests. I've done personal work, like all that kind of stuff. Not that you have to do it. Well, ideally you would have some sort of consistency around it. You don't have to do it all the time, always, and do like 4 hours after work, right? But you have to still keep sharpening your skill set after work, because what happens to a lot of people is they get to work for a company. They're doing some really, really cool stuff, but it's still under NDA, right? So you can't show it off. Then something happens, company shuts down, you can't show any of it off. Now you've basically, the way that I look at it is you are hedging your bets on that game releasing. And if it doesn't, you went all in and you've got nothing to show for it, right? So if I've always been like a strong advocate of personal work, But do sustainable things, right? Like do small projects, like small dioramas where you can really go for a higher quality rather than big stuff, right? That's always my big advocacy there too. But yeah, unfortunately, you have to keep up your skill set. Like I say, a lot of times, right? Like getting into the industry, for a lot of people, it feels like, oh, I've made it, I can relax. I've kind of always looked at that as like, no, this is where it begins. Like this is where the real grind begins. That's at least how I always looked at it, right? And maybe that's not something that you agree with, because I also know, by the way, like a bunch of my friends and colleagues, they probably have like vastly different opinions on this. And they are probably less what is the best word? I was gonna say less ambitious, but that's not true. They have ambition. It's just that their ambition is not just like put into like one thing. Which means just doing like environment art, right? But yeah, I think what it comes down for me is that I've never liked being exposed to so much risk. That's why I always look to having something on the side, right? Another recommendation that I'll give there, if you are making cool shit, try to find a way to sell cool shit, you know? Because a lot of the people in the chat right now, you can make awesome work. You can make awesome work. But sometimes it's about like, okay, what if I take a business hat and I try to turn it into like maybe a product, or maybe I can take a section of this thing that I'm building and I can turn that into a product, you know, somehow. Try to do more of that, because that can give you like self-sustainability, or the potential. Well, like it's not even about, like, in the beginning, it's not even about making a lot of money so that you don't have to rely on your full-time job anymore. It's about seeing that you have the ability to make something from scratch and then selling it and earning money from it. That's the first, and this is the thing that you'll probably hear on YouTube a lot, right? Is that my view on making money in business changed as soon as I made my first dollar on trying to sell something. I was like, wait, I can do this? I can just go out there and like do something for the world, and then if the world agrees that that's what they need, they will give me money for it. That is awesome, right? And everyone here in the chat has something that they can deliver. I can guarantee it. Why is it saying as soon as you get into the industry, the tutorial's over? Yeah. Totally agree. I think my free time must be used learning and to improve. Yeah, but not necessarily all of it, right? You need to still have like a balance, because if you over-index and you spend all your free time doing, learning, and improving and all that kind of stuff, it sounds like the most optimized thing to do, right? From like a robot's perspective, if I work more, that means that I have more output. But the interesting thing is, with creativity, it doesn't correlate to that. Most of your creative inspirational moments, you have them when you're not working and you're purposely taking a break, right? That's why you have a lot of people, including myself, you go take a shower. That's when you have like those moments of inspiration, right? Because you're not sitting down and you're not focusing on the work. It's about like taking a break, detaching, seeing the world in a different light, and then being like, oh my god, I can do stuff that way. Those two things, they go hand in hand. You can't do one thing without the other, right? Because if you're just going outside and daydreaming, nothing gets done. But if you're just working, you never have the time to like daydream and think about like new ways of looking at issues or your future, right? So you need to have those two things working hand in hand. I've seen a couple of people on my ArtStation. The last few things I've done was screenshots to show major differences in my scene, but I've tried recording it and it's exhausting because I jump back and forth. Plus, I also have to fix... Oh, yeah, we talked about that as well, right? Like the video editing stuff. Yeah, honestly, if people start complaining about like your ArtStation profile saying that Even when you've done a breakdown, right? If you have a breakdown saying that you need to show full recordings, just ignore them. Honestly, just ignore them. There's always going to be, I don't know, weird people on the internet. How are you saying? My friend in the industry took 2 weeks of holiday break off work to do a game jam with me. Even that, right? Even that, like, that sounds awesome to me as well. Because, yeah, especially when you work in the industry, right? A lot of it kind of gets bogged down by a lot of stuff, right? Like, there's a lot of communication back and forth, especially if you work in big AAA. Like, it gets... There's a lot of steps that need to be taken compared to what you can do on a game jam, right? A game jam is like, hey, I have this cool idea, so I'm just gonna put it in, you know? That's it. So there's something like very, very, yeah, freeing about doing a game jam, right? Same thing for like a personal project, right? If you're doing environment art, and you get to decide like how it's gonna look, you get to decide the style and the art direction, all that kind of stuff. That's where that like freedom comes in, right? And you get to choose what you want to do. Eisendrag is asking a question. So how do you, as a seasoned artist, tackle a project that you haven't done something similar to yet? It feels daunting, and I get a little bit lost on where to start. So I think for that, we have to go to how much new stuff you're trying to take on, right? Because in the beginning of something that you've not done before, if let's say 80% of the project is new stuff, you're setting yourself up for failing. Don't want to do that, right? Now, as a seasoned artist, there's nothing... Let's say, for example, I want to do something like hard surfacey, right? I've never really done like hard surface stuff. Well, let's say I'm trying to do like sci-fi. Something like Star Citizen, sci-fi, I don't know, you name it, right? I already have like all the tools in my pocket to make those things. I just need to apply them in a different way, right? So what I'll do in that case is I'll probably start looking up like high poly, mid poly workflows, because that seems to be very relevant to doing like a sci-fi project, right? But I can already bring my tools of like texturing and modeling and all that kind of stuff to the table already, right? So the only thing that's new in a project like that for me is just the style and the thematic, right? So there's not really, and maybe the workflow a little bit, like having to work with like decal sheets and all that kind of stuff. But that's like a minor thing. So you have to first of all look at doing some internal inventory, right? Where you look at the skills that you currently have, and then look at like maybe adding one skill on that you don't have yet. And that's when you find out like what is a good project, right? Because here's the thing: if you always get overwhelmed, that just means that you're doing too much stuff. You're trying to do everything in one project. That's not how that works. And also another recommendation: do something that takes you like a week or two. If you suck at like texturing something, don't try to model something first. Grab a free model from somewhere online that has like UVs and do texturing. Only do texturing, right? And if it's done, it's done. You don't even have to post it on ArtStation if you wanted to, but it improved your skill level, right? That takes you 1 or 2 weeks to get like really nice looking textures, right? Because you can focus on the thing that you're trying to learn, right? Do the same thing for modeling, right? If the goal for you is to get better at modeling because you kind of suck at modeling now, totally fine. Just go into Blender, grab something, you know, grab a can. Grab something like this, something that you can actually look at in real life and try to model it as best as you can. Don't worry about textures. Don't worry about Unreal. Just focus on the modeling. That's it. Once it's done, you've improved your modeling. Next project, right? And at a certain point, you're going to come to the point where it's like, hey, I'm actually pretty comfortable with modeling. I'm actually pretty comfortable with like texturing. I know how to bake something down. Okay, what is the next step? Maybe I'll try to add some storytelling into it, right? And then you build a couple of assets that are related to each other in a storytelling sense, and then maybe you build some like mega scan scene around it, right? So yeah, hope that was helpful. But it's always about going smaller, always. If you get overwhelmed, if you're burned out, to your question, Andrea, as well, that's just because you're doing too much stuff, right? Smaller. I think for you, Andrea, like, because you're asking as a seasoned artist, what's your advice to someone who's burned out, but also overwhelmed? I think the overwhelming thing, I think there's a correlation between the two, right? It's just because you have so much to worry about, and you're doing so much or trying to do so much, that's where the burnout feeling, the overwhelm comes from. It's just you have to go smaller. You have to take a breath, focus on one thing at a time. You know, build a list. What are you good at? What are you bad at? Look at the things that you're bad at, and try to find the smallest possible exercise that you can do to get better at it, right? Because also, here's another thing, right? Like, here's another tip for all of you. Like, motivation. Maybe motivation is the wrong word. I'm trying to be very specific with the words that I use, right? But how good you feel about doing art has a massive impact on you doing art. That maybe sounds like super ridiculous, right? But if you already feel like a lot of hesitation about doing art, then trying to do art is gonna feel like you're moving a boulder up a hill, right? So what we need to do in the beginning, especially if you're dealing with some of these feelings, is you have to find the smallest possible thing. Like, literally, like, find the smallest possible thing that you can make where you can even stumble. Like, it takes you like an evening, let's say, and just try to rediscover the fun of it, right? Like, why did you start doing this? Because it can even be like, hey, I'm just gonna go, I don't know, I just want to do, let's say, hand painting textures, right? I'm just gonna go into Photoshop, I'm just gonna take a square, I'm just gonna make a tileable texture. Have some fun with it. Have some fun with it. The same thing can be done for, like, let's say, level art, right? Like, level art is one of those things where it's like really easy to get into. You just go into Unreal Engine, you just look at like the latest free pack that is available, open it up, start dragging stuff into the scene, and just have fun with it. Have fun with it. Andrea is saying, I'm trying to remind myself that you can always build bigger when starting small. I don't think you need to remind yourself of that, honestly, because that might also be a part of why you feel overwhelmed, is that you have the eventual expectation that you're going to build big stuff, which is why you're now doing the stuff right now. Which means that you're in the back of your head, you're already thinking about the big thing in the future, right? What you want to do is you want to clear all the expectations, everything, and you just want to have fun with it, right? In the beginning, once you then start building that muscle of, once you start building that muscle of like, hey, I actually had a lot of fun with just like hand painting some stylized textures. That was actually pretty fun. Now I'm gonna see if I can download like a model somewhere. Let's say MeetMat, right? Like, I don't know if it's like still available somewhere, but you can find like free assets on like Sketchfab. Find one, and then just start texturing that, right? Have fun. Don't think about portfolio. Don't think about like any expectations. Try to get rid of all of them. Just have fun. And then at a certain point, what we're trying to do with this, right? What we're trying to do with this is we are slowly, step by step, increasing the expectations, right? Because you're not gonna go from, hey, I'm currently stuck, to I'm gonna do an environment without doing all the steps in between. That's not how that's gonna work, right? So we need to kind of put on the training wheels, right? do a small texture, then grab a free asset, texture that one. Hey, that was pretty fun. Okay, maybe I'm just gonna model something real quick, do some unwrapping, and then I'm gonna texture it myself again. Hey, that was pretty fun. Okay, let me try and bake some stuff down, right? And you gradually over time you start increasing like the complexity of things, right? But it always has to be, it has to be so easy that you stumble upon it in the beginning. A CGMA course assignment for hand painting stylized assets was just to texture a cube into something with textures. It's small and cute and interesting to see how far you can push a texture with a simple cube. Yeah, I mean, that's like a very common exercise, right? I have a lot of those like texture cubes like still lying around from like my school days. And it was literally just like, hey, here's a cube. Texture it. You know? It can be a plane, it can be a cube, it can be whatever. Just have fun, right? Have fun, try to make it as small as possible, and then increase the complexity or the expectations with each project. Because here's the thing, like, with the stuff that I'm explaining now, there are going to be moments where your motivation is going to dip, or you're going through a rough time in your life, like anything like that can happen, right? And if we then look at what I just tried to teach you, right? It's like you take the smallest possible thing and you just increase the intensity over time. You can also go back, which is totally fine, right? Sometimes you have to take a step back so that you can then move forward again. So sometimes we do a project where it's like, yeah, I've built up all these skills. I think I'm good. And then you run into a wall and you keep running into a wall and it's like, maybe not yet. Okay. What was too difficult about this, right? What could help here is doing like a little retrospective with yourself. And what that means is just like, okay, this project failed. Why did it fail? What was I doing wrong, right? And how can I then move forward without running into that same wall again and like trying to learn from it, right? Because there have been like a lot of projects that I've done, especially when I was a student or like even in the first couple of years in the industry, where I was trying to do cool shit when I was totally unprepared to do that cool shit, you know? And sometimes, you know, sometimes you run into the wall and it's like, oh shit, I run into the wall again. Dang it. Okay, well, that sucks. But hey, I still learned a lot of stuff though. Okay, back to the drawing board, do a new project. I think one thing to realize that, and I'm trying to be very conscious of this all the time, is that if you want to get better at something, you have to suck at it first. And everyone goes through this. And I think the better you are dealing with like sucking at something, the better you get at like getting quicker at getting good at something. Sounds weird, huh? But yeah, it's almost about like right now, like if let's say go back to the original question, right? Or like the previous question, I guess, where it's like, if I wanted to do something that's like vastly different, I know that I'm going to put the training wheels on again in certain aspects, right? And that is totally fine because I'm doing something new. I'm going to suck at like hard surface design because I can't design for shit, you know? That is fine. And then I get better at it, right? Because, oh my God, I love being dumb at something. And then someone else or like some tutorial like coming in and just being like, oh, if you think about this way, then you get like, I don't know, better end results or something like that, right? Like the learning process. Oh my God, I love it so much. Oh. And to learn basically means that you have to suck at something first to then get better at it, right? Yeah. I always felt weird that people generally suggest discipline, but discipline becomes really easy when you're having fun. Yeah, I think it is because I think the reason why people gravitate towards discipline, and this counts for me as well, right? It is nice when you have fun, but there's gonna be times where you're not having fun. And that's when That's when discipline comes in to keep you grounded, right? Because doing something that is done with discipline and then having fun on top of it is the best. But if fun falls away, you still need to be disciplined to do it, right? And that's why it almost feels like everything that comes on top of discipline is like a bonus, right? So if you're having fun and you're learning and you're enjoying the process and all that kind of stuff, that is almost like happy accidents on top of it. But discipline is going to be at the bottom of it. Because if you don't have discipline, if you don't have discipline and you're having fun, it's easy. But if it's hard and you don't have discipline, you're not going to do it. So that's probably why people always tend to go for discipline first and then everything comes on top of it. But yeah, I mean, it's not that you're wrong, right? Like, it becomes really easy when you're having fun to do discipline. But it's, you get, and this is interesting, right? Like, this is some life advice, I would say, is that you get to know yourself and you get to know the people around you when the going gets tough. Because when stuff is easy, right? And you'll see this in the games industry as well, right? Like, when money was abundant, jobs were opening, like everything was easy, it was fun, companies were doing like lots of events and all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, oops, that all fell away. Now what? Right? But you get to really know people for who they are. And some people step up to the plate and they become real leaders, right? And some people kind of retract and they're like, oh shit, this sucks. And they kind of let the situation determine who they are, right? So yeah. At least that's what I've seen over time. And that's what I recognize in myself as well. That's why I think your actions mean more when you're under pressure than when it's easy, right? For example, in some of the most, I mean, I've made like dumb mistakes. I've made like in the moment like dumb decisions with Beyond Extend even that I'm not proud of. But it really taught me those lessons of that it's those moments that actually matter, right? Art does become fun, even if it's challenging, when you don't have to think about time and portfolio, because the last thing I constantly want to think about is breakdown. Is the breakdown in coming across as skilled? Yeah. Yeah, but that's unfortunately what you have to do, right, to get into the industry. I think it is interesting to try and build some sort of like habit or routine around not thinking about that as the end result. And then if it happens to be good, you can kind of use that as an end result, right? So it's the kind of like rewiring your thinking, because I know a lot of people like yourself, Andrea, that they want to start a project, but they're already overwhelmed in the beginning because they think that it needs to be a portfolio project. Don't do that. Get rid of those expectations. Build a project. Try to teach yourself like a bunch of cool stuff that you can use in the future. Have fun with the project as much as you can. And then if it turns out to be good, put it on your portfolio, right? But here's the most important part, right? And that's why I constantly say go smaller. You don't want to do that on, let's say, a 6-month to like an 8-month project, because that means that you're putting all your eggs in a single basket. Right? So that's why I'm a constant advocate of like doing smaller stuff. Because even if you have a project that is not ready for your portfolio, you shouldn't feel bad about that, right? It is like, hey, I still learned a bunch of stuff. It's not portfolio ready. I can make it portfolio ready. I don't want to right now, so I'm just going to do the next thing. And then instead of like losing like 8 months, right? Because again, that timeline adds a bunch of pressure to you too. If you've been working on something for like 8 months, you need to put it on your portfolio, right? Because you've just spent like 8 months working on it. That's crazy. So that's why smaller projects create like less expectations. I always feel like I'm too late with everything. During COVID, there was a lot of jobs. I was still at school. RAM prices were normal before, but now I want to buy a desktop soon, and the prices are insane. No, I don't think you're too late with everything. It's just this stuff goes in waves, you know? And here's actually an interesting thing, trying to tie it back to a previous conversation, right? The people that are going to make it work when the industry is in a shit place are going to be the people that freaking thrive when the industry is doing good. Right? That's the way that I think about it. And Lily, you can be proud of the work that you're doing. Honestly, like the work ethic that you have and the stuff that you bring to the table and like how engaged you are. Like, sure, it might not pay off right now, right? Because the industry is like in the shitter. But I can already imagine that you're gonna do so good when the industry is gonna come back, or like, I don't know, gives you more opportunities or whatever, you know? So yeah. Hello, Devil. Good to see you. How are you doing? I'm doing good. Yeah, having a nice day. We're gonna actually have to dive into some portfolio reviews in just a minute, you know. Just a couple more things here. So I wish CGMA was back. I thought of going to GNOME Workshop, but the price is high, and I heard mixed opinions. Yeah, I mean, you know, like we are like hard at work on our own courses. So who knows? You know, maybe that could be of interest to you. But yeah, we'll keep you more up to date on that. But yeah, CGMA closing down actually sucks, because that was like the one reliable thing where I would kind of send people to, you know. I see so many people write that they have been looking for 4 years to see results, and that scares me sometimes. Yeah, but you don't know what those people are doing, right? Like, you can only rely on your own inputs, and you are getting results, right? You are currently working. You know, it's not probably the ideal work that you would have, but you are getting opportunities, right? I would honestly focus on that, because I don't want to throw like a random person on the internet under the bus. But I know some people that have been looking for a long time, but then they don't put any effort in their portfolio, and then they send like one job application a month, right? It's like, yeah, okay, like, sure. Again, not saying that it's easy, but yeah. I swear everyone always recommended CGMA. It was like the golden standard for courses. It's a shame that's no longer a thing. Yeah, I mean, they had some really good instructors. Yeah, even though like the pricing was somewhat unpopular for people working in like Europe, especially, right? Because even I, working as like a professional in the industry, was like really debating doing some CGMA courses, but like the cost was like the main prohibitive factor. But we'll see. I would be happy if we can get to like the study you're saying now. That is honestly my hope, that we can get there for the academy that we're building, where people say like, hey, it's the gold standard, like always recommended. That would be the true ideal. And I will fight hard to get it there. Yes, we are going to go into like an early access period, like starting next month. That's when my contract is running out, so that's when like a lot of free time is going to open up. And then that would be like the first iteration of really trying to improve what we're doing, right? Like actually putting it to the tests, doing improvements, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's not easy out there, but knowing you're trying can eventually lead somewhere. Applying and reaching out can result into something eventually. Yeah, that's why my recommendation is you kind of have to build this attitude of being an opportunist, you know? You literally have to just try everything. In this climate especially, you have to try everything. If you're just doing like LinkedIn applications and you're going to like an occasional website, that's not going to work. You have to just literally try everything. Go to conferences, reach out to individual people, talk to recruiters. Like, oh my god, try everything, you know? even if it feels like shameful or whatever, just disregard all that. Just try it, because it might have a good result, you know. All right. Feel free to keep asking your questions, but it is time to dive into some portfolio reviews. So let me switch up the screen. We've got 2 portfolio reviews today, Alessandro and Ludmila. Good to see you both here. Thank you for applying. Cool. How we grade portfolios? 4 things. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. You can kind of read what's on screen right now. Hireability, presentation, artistry, and techniques, right? So we are going to go through that, and at the end, you'll get a score. It'll get added to the leaderboard of people. It's not really a leaderboard. I feel like that's sort of like disingenuous. It's more like you can see what other people have done and maybe learn from them. You know, that's kind of the intent behind it. But let's go. So Alessandro is looking to get hired by a AA or a AAA company as a prop, environment, or vehicle artist. Okay. First small red flag here. Prop, environment, and vehicle artist. 3 completely different things, right? There might be some overlap between... Yeah, I know. Like, especially if you want to get into like AAA, you have to specialize, right? So I'm already going to keep that in mind. Sorry, Tim, but where can I send my portfolio for a portfolio review? You have to be a member. So this is like a member exclusive thing that we're doing. So if you become a member, you get access to the stuff on your dashboard. You can actually see it right here under your perks. And you can get like all this other cool stuff as well that you have access to. But portfolio reviews is one in here. Cool. So Alessandro, AA or AAA company. Let's have a look. In Rome, Italy. Beautiful. An environment 3D artist based in Rome with experience in 3D interior, exterior rendering, props, and hard surface modeling. Okay, cool. Let's talk about like first impressions. First impressions. A lot of different things happening already, right? Like the variation of work, it seems to be heavily skewed towards like hard surface stuff specifically. And then it kind of looks like there's some older stuff here with like some architectural visualization like thrown in for good measure too. So think about this, right? The initial reaction is super important, right? This is also the reason why we constantly say like only high quality work. And you have to put the work that is going to be for the job that you want, not the jobs that you've had, right? So this architectural visualization stuff can be okay. You have it in like a separate thing already. But I would really section that off as like, hey, this is my current portfolio and this is old work, you know, like separate the two a bit. So that it becomes really clear to me. Because yeah, it seems like you're kind of all over the place. And that also leads me into what was said here, right? Like AA or AAA, that is fine. But prop, environment, and vehicles, those are like 3 different things. I can find an artist in those niches that are better than you, right? Well, that is the thinking about it, right? If you are trying to do those 3 things, it takes you like, let's say, triple the time to get really good, where someone who's like really just focusing on vehicle art, that's who we want, right? Because especially in AAA, we don't hire generalists. We want you to focus on executing at the best and highest level that you can in the niche that you picked for yourself, right? If that is environment art, do that. If it's vehicle art, do that. If it's prop art, do that. But that makes you like way easier to get hired, right? I think in the long term, there is something about like branching out a bit more. But if you want to get a job in the AAA industry, you have to niche down. And I need to immediately see on your portfolio, like, that's what this person wants to do, right? And I think what I can get now is sort of hard surface aligned, right? Because all the thematics of everything that you're doing, even the environment is still hard surface based. But yeah. The other thing, old work. We're gonna dive into some of this stuff, but I don't want to see old stuff. Try to, again, only the stuff that is the highest quality. That's the stuff that I want to see, right? I assume you can review portfolios that are meant for props only too, not just environment art. Yep. Yeah, I can. Because here's the thing, like, I don't tend to focus a lot on like the actual art. It's more about your positioning in your career and how you present yourself as an artist, right? Item Dragon's asking, how about an overlap between prop and environment art? Are they still too general? I think they are coming closer together, right? Prop and environment art usually has some sort of overlap, so I can look at that. But let's say if you want to do environment art and vehicle art, those are like completely different things. Cool. So main thing that I can see here, hard surface modeling. That seems to be the guiding through line, which means that if you're going for environment art, I don't really see that happening with what I'm seeing here. It will be hard surface props, probably. That is what your work is saying compared to what you are saying yourself, right? Let me make sure that everything is on stream. So let's dive into some of the work. No, before we do that, actually, let me have a look at your links here. Oh, don't do this. Oh, whatever. Okay, whatever. Actually, let me try something else here. No, I want to. Can I just do this? Oh, well. Nope. We're just gonna have a little quick peek here. Yeah, this stuff, 3D artist, hard surface modeler, prop artist, environment artist, lighting artist, ArcViz, too broad. It's not gonna work in AAA. That is not gonna work, right? Because here's the thing, even if you say, hey, I can do all this stuff, we can tell by looking at the work what you are good at and what you aren't good at, right? So it's almost like you're saying, hey, I can build an entire car, even though the last couple of years you've only been like putting, I don't know, like wheels onto cars, right? You might be an expert in wheels, and we can see that because you put the wheels on like really nicely. But when it comes to the doors, they come in all crooked and stuff, right? Stupid example here. But that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Is that even if you say, hey, I'm all this stuff, your portfolio is gonna tell another story, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get those two stories as close together as possible, right? So if you decide like, hey, I want to become an environment artist, that's what I love the most in life, I want to see more environment art stuff. So that means focusing less on hard surface stuff because that's no longer relevant to your goals, right? And there's going to be a transition period where a lot of the older work then has to be fading out to then have you do like small dioramas and environments and stuff too. Right. Do we have a CV somewhere? I don't think we do. Well, let's see. You've been freelancing. Interesting. So let's see. Co-founder, web artist. You have like a broad range of skills that you can do, right? And again, I don't think that's to your detriment, right? I think that's actually setting you up for success in the future. However, if you want to get into AA or AAA, you need to niche down, right? Cool. Okay, good stuff. Again, like recommendation that I give to people, give me a CV that I can download and store somewhere, right? That's going to be helpful. Make it clean. Give me a summarized version of all the things you're trying to say. Cool. We are just gonna skip through most of this ArcViz stuff, right? Because it's not relevant to what we do. I think the most relevant thing that I can say here is that cool, it's ArcViz. It's not really relevant to what you want to do in the games industry, right? Let's say even if it's environment art. Not really, because most of this just consists of using pre-made assets and then just slapping like tidables or like textures on it, right? So yeah. Eisendrag, where would you place a CV? It depends. So if you have a pro subscription of ArtStation, you can upload your CV. I think that's like locked behind the pro tier. If not, honestly, just have it as like a downloadable thing on your LinkedIn, right? I want to immediately see like a link to your ArtStation, let's say, and then also a CV. Just add it to your LinkedIn. Basically, whenever you're doing external links like this, your LinkedIn, that is also saying like, hey, this is a professional view of what I can bring to the table. If it has your CV there, that's fine. Devil is saying in environment artist portfolio, when you see prop modeling, foliage, environments, materials, plus textures, right? Would you see, sorry, prop modeling, foliage? No, it depends. Like foliage is a separate thing. Materials can be a separate thing. So it kind of depends, right? Like, for example, for me, I always loved the idea because even environment art is a bucket, right? So technically, I'm a senior environment artist, but what I really focus on is majority of my time is spent on level art, which means that I use pre-existing assets or I build like, I don't know, you could call me like a world artist or something like that, I guess. It depends on your description. But the majority of time, I just build like fundamental things into the level and then add like pre-existing things on top of them built by other people, right? In like a very broad sense. If you think about it that way, I would even describe like being a prop artist as like a subcategory of like an environment artist because they're just focusing on like the individual assets. But you can have a foliage artist that is only doing foliage, or you can have like a rock artist or a biome artist that only does like sculpting of rocks and cliffs and like all the natural elements in an open world terrain, right? So yeah. So it kind of depends on what you put on your portfolio, because there's, even if you do full environments, there is always going to be one thing that stands out. Right, we were talking about some of the ArcViz stuff here. Let me skip through some more stuff. This is all rendered in V-Ray or something, right? I'm assuming. Yeah, V-Ray. That's also a thing. Offline rendering, not really that relevant. Pre-existing assets, not really that relevant. I honestly think that most of this old stuff too, I would really put it in like old work, or maybe even just remove it from your portfolio completely. Because here's the thing. I don't really get a lot of value from seeing this as an environment artist myself, honestly. And if I were to scrutinize like a bunch of stuff, it would really start breaking down like really quickly, right? Because the study you have to do for ArcViz, where you have like tidables and like, you know, very simplistic pre-made assets in most cases, there's nothing interesting happening with like the way that you make the materials here. So yeah, I would consider removing all this stuff from your portfolio, especially when you're trying to get into game stuff. Or pick like, I don't know, one or two things that you like the most and maybe keep them on here, right? Like, I could potentially make an argument for this one because it has some like world building and like set dressing surrounding it. But these other ones, where it's just like interiors, very sterile kind of looking interiors, I don't really think that they're relevant to it. Right. So, and this is some product rendering stuff, right? I don't really care about this stuff as an environment artist myself, right? Like trying to look into getting you hired for this position, I'm really trying to think about like, okay, what are the skills that you had to use here that translate towards making environment art, right? Or like, let's say a prop or something like that. And there's not too many, right? And that's the way that I would always think about this stuff. Sure, there might be and also this, like, oh, it's just a test, but I start liking the results, which means that it's not finished, which means that why is it on your portfolio, right? It's stuff like that where it's immediately like, just remove it then. Long time ago. I know that I'm being like very crude here, right? But long time ago, maybe it doesn't need to be in a portfolio then, right? Totally fine. Showcase the best work. Just remove it. Whip. This is a whip project. If it is whip, then again, why is it on your portfolio? I know I'm being very, very immediate with some of this stuff, right? But if I read whip, that immediately says to me, not made for a portfolio. This is also using like the VFX workflow, right? Like, but like UDIMs, basically multiple texture sets that you can use like multiple textures on. Not relevant for games. So yeah, there's not a lot of relevant stuff happening here for game-specific things. Work in progress, remove. Work in progress, remove, you know. Work in progress, remove this. I know, I'm going through stuff really quickly, but this is the thing. You put this in your portfolio and say like, hey, look, this is the best thing that I can do. And then we're already starting out like we're starting on a low note at this point, right? Because there's a lot of work in progress on your portfolio already. And now, even if the next project is going to be better, it is going to be an uphill battle for them to be better, right? So that is what I want you to think about. It's like designing your portfolio to like capture me from beginning to end. This is also the reason why I love going back to the older work and making my way to the most recent stuff, because it is very revealing to what you consider to still be relevant enough to put on your portfolio. Yeah. How can I submit my portfolio? You have to be a community member to submit the portfolio. So yeah, we have a queue of people that are getting their portfolios reviewed at this point. Like Lily says, thank you, Lily. So yeah, become a community member. You get like a whole bunch of cool stuff, and you get your portfolio reviewed as well. Hey, Will. Good to see you here. Tactical Game Boy. Let's have a look. See, because even this stuff, like, I like what I'm seeing here, right? Compared to the older stuff that we're seeing. This is getting pretty interesting. But I'm already going into this with like a sour taste in my mouth just because from the previous stuff, right? So we're fighting an uphill battle. Model was made in 3ds Max and baked in Marmoset. Rendering was done in Unreal Engine with path tracing. All the environmental props and mega scans. That's good. I think that's fine. I would love to see more breakdowns. If this is your low poly, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up here. A lot of wasted geometry. I want to see, for breakdowns, I want to see wireframes, your UVs, textures. Give me all that I need to know when it comes to showcasing your breakdowns, right? Because I think the presentation, you know, you're doing some interesting stuff. You have some like really nice close-up renders. The presentation itself is pretty good. I like where this is going. Just dive into more of the breakdowns now. Devil is saying, what do you think of having props on a blank background versus an environment background? It is honestly, the difference in presentation is massive, right? Blank background, to me, at this point, with all the available tools that are out there, feels lazy compared to doing like a quick setup in Megascans like this. This doesn't take long, but it looks way better. So just do that. 15 UDIMs, well, yeah, for like the asset that we were just looking at, like you don't want to have trim sheets. Not trim sheets, UDIMs. Gabo was asking the same thing. A hero prop need to have UDIMs? Nope. UDIMs are not used in games. Don't use UDIMs for a game portfolio ever. Well, not ever. I know that like some games like use UDIMs in very specific cases, but the broad consensus here is no UDIMs. That's like a VFX thing. Cool. Okay, we're getting more into like game art relevant stuff, right? If you're doing fan art, make sure that I can read it, because now you're just using a logo and you're doing like appropriation from like an IP. Make sure that I can see that it is fan art just out of the box, and you can probably even see this because this feels like fake marketing, right? Because you're trying to convince me that you worked on like Warhammer 40k, and then you click on it and it's like, oh, psych, it's fan art. Devil is saying, what if an asset is like 70 meters wide? Wouldn't that warrant UDIMs? Nope. We do different things in game art. If an asset is like 70 meters wide in games, we use tidables with like, I don't know, potentially some like RGB masking, potentially. But it kind of depends. Yeah, tidables. Tidables, vertex painting, all that kind of stuff. We have like way different things that we use in like games compared to VFX. Because the thing is, like, I don't know how expensive UDIMs are because I've never had to use them, right? But there must be a good reason why we don't use them when it comes to being more expensive, right? Because the thing is, the difference between games is that you assume that a texture is going to be tiling infinitely. A UDIM is basically saying like, hey, I'm going to store all this unique detail in your UVs, just in like separate UV shells, which I'm assuming is then also going to count as like an individual texture that's going to be pulled in. However, that doesn't matter in VFX because we're doing offline rendering, right? So it just goes down to a render farm, it renders out like a still frame, and that's what it is going to be. In games, we are heavily performance restricted because everything is like, you have to have it like 360 available. It has to be like loaded into like the memory dynamically and rendered out of it. Like, yeah, a lot of performance restrictions compared to VFX. Battery case. Yeah, still applying VFX techniques here, right? Like not caring about like the optimization of like the asset at all, which means that you baked everything in Marmoset. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I want to see like a clean low poly. Let me actually skip ahead just a couple of things because I think you're not showing the low poly here. We're not showing low poly here. Okay. We are getting a low poly here. That is pretty good. 18k tries. So we're getting into optimization territory, which is quite nice. But for anything else, right? Like, I know that I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but like anything else, I want to see low poly. Yeah, low poly stuff, right? Because even this just has like a fuck ton of topology. This is like high poly. This is not game ready at all, right? This is good for like if you want to render like a scene and you want to have like a pre-rendered cinematic or something like that. That's where this is relevant. But otherwise, we want to see low poly stuff. I'm skipping through a lot of it because a lot of it is probably going to suffer from the same sort of feedback that we're seeing, right? Yeah, same here. Okay. This is cool. Like VR stuff, I'm really curious to see if you can get like any sort of topology going on here. It is a professional development, so I'm not sure if you can, but yeah. Yeah, way too dense for games. It's gonna be mental. But here's the thing, right? Like you have like a really nice high poly asset. Try to optimize this to a low poly and then bake it down. You know, that could be like a fantastic exercise to see how you can get something like this, like game ready. Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, yes, that would be like the main criticism, right? We went through like stuff really quickly now. Let me actually give some of these a proper look as well. No breakdowns. Love, Dead and Robots. So this is inspired by a concept, but you're using again a logo from somewhere else, right? Which if it's not clear that it's fan art, that always is gonna leave like a sour taste in, or like it's always gonna sour like people's opinion. Like using the Cyberpunk logo here too. It's not great, right? Like just add like fan art to it. Cool. Okay, I think we know enough. Let's talk about like the action points here, right? So first things first is we need to really niche down to a specific discipline. If that is hard surface props, that's totally fine. But then don't call yourself like an environment artist and a vehicle artist too, because like I think what I said in the beginning is true. For all, if I were to look at your vehicles separately, they're not going to stand out, right? If I look at your assets separately, they're not game appropriate. If I look at your environment separately, a lot of that is not made by yourself, right? Like if I look at this one, for example, I think you've made like these modules, but then the forest around it is just from Megascans, I'm assuming. Base models, I use Blender. Yeah, it doesn't even say. All the models are using mid-poly with not perfect UV layout enough to get what I wanted. This is shooting yourself in the foot, right? Whenever you say like, hey, it's not perfect, but it's all right. Like, don't say it at all then, right? But yeah, so if I look at your individual things, let's say I look at your props, I think your props are the strongest, right? Just in the way that you present them currently. They're just not game ready yet because a lot of them are not optimized and low poly, right? If I look at your environments, your environment, I think you're not doing most of it yourself, or you've not really dived into how to make a bit of foliage or how to make the textures yourself or the materials and all that kind of stuff, what we expect from an environment artist, right? And then when it comes to your vehicles, none of them really hold up under scrutiny, right? Which is what I was saying in the beginning, right? If you want to get into AAA, I want to hire the best person for the job, right? And if you are presenting yourself as a generalist, that means that you're not going to stand out in any of the categories that we talked about before. So that's where we are, right? That's why you need to niche down into a specific discipline and pick the one you want to work in the most, right? Then the next big thing is, well, the next thing we talked about is old work needs to be removed. Old and irrelevant work, right? Irrelevant work needs to be removed. Portfolio should be high quality. Stuff only. And then also the big thing is there's no game art, right? Like we're getting into game art with like your latest projects, I feel, right? So there is a transition happening into game art. But if we're doing a quick comparison, right? The only thing that I can really use to kind of get a better understanding of what you're doing in game art is this. That stuff is relevant. The rest of it... Oh, no, that's not true. The VR stuff is relevant too. The rest of it is more VFX related, right? VFX, ArcViz related, or it's missing breakdowns where I can't see. So this means that 90% of the stuff we looked at today is just not relevant to be in your portfolio if you want to become like an environment art, not environment artist, like a game artist, right? And that's something that we need to fix, right? That means doing, that's a lot of red lines. I know, but this is the thing, right? Like, I know that it's very crude to say, but again, the exercise here is to let you in on what other people think about your portfolio, but don't say, right? This is the most interesting, this is the most important stuff. Because the rest of it was, almost all of it was, sure, it was maybe baked, but then the topology wasn't low poly enough to be considered game art appropriate, right? So then I kind of have to ignore all that kind of stuff. Then it was missing breakdowns. Then it was using UDIMs, or it was arc visualization. You know, those things, they immediately in my head is like, okay, I can't use that. So then the only thing that remains is like the last stuff you've done. Even when you go and look at it, it is just pretty pictures and there's no breakdown. So I'm leaning onto the assumption that this is game art. Don't know, because you don't show. Then we have something like this where I'm going to be going on assumptions again. Anyway, we're going around in circles, right? So I want you to show game art. High to low poly. Trim sheets, working with tilables. And also, if you've done, and Will said this in the chat, that's the exact point that I was going to, right? If you have done so, but you don't show it, you need to be more transparent about it. Because that is important, right? Because I might be looking at your work and I might be very, very direct and very blunt with it. Where maybe you're like, hey, but I did this, I did that. But it comes down to if you show it. Because I'm gonna be real, like even if you explain it to me in the description, but you don't show it, I'm not gonna trust it. To go into the point that Will is saying in the chat, to make everything as obvious as possible. As a hiring manager, I won't have the time to read every description. Exactly to my point, right? That's why I'm not gonna click read more. I'm not gonna focus too much on the description that's on the page. I want you to show, don't tell, right? Because if it's, for example, in this case, if it's not a breakdown, you're not showing me the low poly, I'm just going to assume that this is a high poly and textured in that way. So not game relevant again, right? So that means that this doesn't count. And I'm just going to go to the next thing. So yeah, show things. Right, let's talk about your presentation though. I think your presentation, here's an interesting thing, right? Like the latest pieces, the lighting and the way that you present the work and the way that you do like the beauty shots are actually pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with the way that those came out, right? And the way that you present it, and you're taking extra time into doing like little mega scan setups and all that kind of stuff. That is good. So that would, if that was the only thing that we were looking at, you would get like pretty good points. However, you then also shoot yourself in the foot by keeping like all your old work on your portfolio. And honestly, a lot of that stuff just doesn't hold up to current day standards. So that's going to detract from the points, right? Yeah, because that is one of the things. Showcase only the most relevant and best artwork you can create. That is costing you a lot of points in this. So yeah, let's go for something that's like low. Artistry. This is a difficult one because, again, not game art, right? So that's going to cost you a lot of points. I can see that you have like the artistic skills. Your compositions are good. Your the way that you add your colors and your compositions and the way that you do your textures is pretty decent. All that kind of stuff is good. But again, it's not game relevant though. So what does it matter? Right? That's the question that I come to like all the time. And in techniques, there's almost no techniques, right? Or no techniques shown, rather. There is a lot of technique happening, but if you don't show it and you don't make it game appropriate, then what's the point again, right? So that means that we land up with like you're doing a bunch of really cool stuff, right? You're doing a lot of really cool stuff and it looks nice. It's just not relevant to the industry that you want to work in, right? Because we can make cool shit, and I think this actually might be like the most relevant post that you've done in your entire portfolio, because you are showcasing the high poly, you are showcasing the low poly, the amount of triangles, the textures and the UVs. You've got a good texel density, texture size. This is really good. It is just surrounded by a stuff like a lot of assets or like a lot of artwork that is missing the thing that you did here, honestly. 2x1 texture as well. Wait, is that... Why is it stretched? Why... This is not... Wait, I'm confused. Okay, I'm not going to dive into this like too much. But why are your UVs stretched? That is interesting. Because at first, what I thought was that you had a stretched UV, and then for presentation purposes, you just like scaled it down to like a 1x1 again. Yeah, there's some weird stuff happening. I have no idea why you're doing this. If you stretched your UVs just to make sure that like the UVs were like full, that is not a way to do it. You don't want to uniformly, or like, you want to scale your UVs uniformly, because as soon as you start stretching things, it's just not gonna look good. Oh, sorry. So that is weird. So again, there's like slight hints, even in the asset that is most game relevant, there are things where I'm like, I don't fully trust what's going on here, right? There's some hints, there's some fundamental things going wrong, and you're hinting at them by like showcasing the work. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so action points. What I would say is, first of all, research the workflows that you use, right? Workflows for making game appropriate things. I think, Alessandro, I have to double check if you are in the community, and if we looked at your work, so many people that I look at, but I think you're making the boat, no? Or am I just confusing it with someone else? Alessandro Forden. Okay, so you're making... Yeah, you're making the Yamamoto. Okay. Yeah. One thing that I'll say, for next project, don't make something fucking huge. Go smaller, focus on the workflows, get the workflows right, and then scale up from there, right? Because that feels like you're missing a lot of fundamental knowledge and the way that you should be doing things. And then you're just tackling like bigger projects, which means that you have to sacrifice like the intent to just like all of a sudden you need to take care of, right? So go smaller with your next project. So again, action points, make your work more industry relevant, especially to the thing that you specifically want to do. You have a lot of like really cool like hard surface assets. If that is what you want to do, because it seems like you gravitate towards that naturally, that is fine. Make all the things that you do game appropriate then, right? Yeah. Remove all the older pieces from your work. Make it again. You have to dress up your art station for the job that you want, not the jobs that you had. So yeah, that's the thing that I would do. Remove the old work, and then keep building onto your skills that are more game relevant, right? Yeah, really pick a niche, pick what you want to work on, and yeah, way more transparency, right? Way more transparency. Show me the breakdowns. Go into the niches, go into the details, and explain how you've done stuff. So thank you for sharing your work. I will share your work in the chat as well, so that you can have a look for yourself. Again, people that come on the show really appreciate you taking the time and like putting your work up. I know that sometimes this can be like very intense and very brutal, right? But again, Alessandro, you're doing awesome stuff, right? It is my intent is to like that energy that you bring and that passion that you bring to the table, which is freaking awesome, right? Keep that, but channel it more towards the thing that you want to do and be more specific with it if you want to break into AAA. That's what you want to do. Right, we got some questions in the chat. Gabo is asking, a texture size is better. Is it better 4K or 2K for a prop? It depends on the size of the prop and the texture density that you use. Yeah, that's what I would say. So look into how big. Well, look into textile density, honestly. We have a great documentation on textile density. It explains everything that you need to know about textile density. So let me share that with you really quick. So if you want to read about textile density, go check out the following link. Check out the following link and read on textile density. Isn't there like a rule of thumb of like minimum 12 textile density? What does that mean? 12 what? 12 apples per meter? I'm assuming that you're saying like 12 pixels per centimeter, right? But there is no rule of thumb. It kind of depends on the game that you're building, right? I mean, we're talking about like professional quality then, right? If I were to give a rough estimation for your work for 12 pixels per apple, yes. Yeah. Artbook is on the point. Like 12 pixels per apple, that's what you need to aim for. No, like if I were to give a recommendation for your ArtStation posts, I would say 10.24 pixels per centimeter to 20.48, which translates. I'm honestly a bigger fan of per meter because that makes more sense in my head. What I would say is then go for 1K per meter, right? Like 1024 pixels per meter. I think that's good. If you want to go higher than that, go for like 2048 pixels per meter, right? That is way easier to think about rather than pixels per centimeter, because then you're working in like this weird metric. Is 5.12 still true for third-person games? It kind of depends like what game you're working towards, right? I know that that's probably still on like the documentation that we have. Probably not. I would like lean more towards. I think the scale has shifted up a little bit, where third-person game, let's say, like is probably going to be 1K per meter, and then like a first person. I think honestly, it was more like an indication that I was trying to give. There's no exact measurements, right? But it's more about the idea that if you have your camera more up close to things in the world, then you're going to go higher in textile density because that's what you need. If the camera is further away from things that are going to be close to the camera, that's where the texel density is going to be lower, right? So games are going to have different texel densities depending on what the quality bar is. But yeah. So it's more, think about this more as the underlying thinking rather than, oh, this is the exact measurement that I need to use. Even though most of the advice that even the advice that we give gets interpreted as like, oh, this is the rule for like first person games, that's what I'm going to be using. It's like, well, you can, but it should be more seen as like it depends on certain factors. If it's a hero prop, you aim for the higher end, so closer to 2K per meter. It can be. It can be. I would say that probably for your portfolio, consistency is probably going to be the best. So if you're making a diorama or like a smaller scene, make everything towards like 2K per meter. Because while you're right into trying to think about it from like a production perspective, where your hero asset is going to be potentially slightly higher in texel density, right? I don't think you should apply that kind of thinking on your portfolio, because the consistency between assets is probably going to be better. Because what I'm trying to avoid is that I'll look at your portfolio, and if one thing looks more crisp than the other things, I don't know why you did that, right? So I'm just going to assume that you have inconsistent texel density. So that's why I'm saying it is better to go for consistency overall for your portfolio. And then in a game context, when you're doing professional work, then you're probably running into issues or like situations where, let's say, oh, there's a cinematic prop that has to have like higher texel density because the camera gets really up close to it, all that kind of stuff, right? But those are like the outliers. So I wouldn't necessarily apply that sort of thinking to your portfolio. Will is saying, I think in actual production, the only things with higher texel density are the things you see up close, like usable items, weapons, etc. Even hero props placed in the world will follow world texel. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, because even if I remember, like from Far Cry, the weapons had a higher texel density, and then cinematic assets had a higher texel density, right? And I know in a lot of games, what they do is like for cinematic quality assets, what they'll do is they'll just make like higher texel density versions of those that are only used in cinematic props. Portfolio should just be cinematic props. Don't listen to that advice. I think honestly there is some truth to it, as in like a portfolio on ArtStation is always going to deviate slightly away from what is expected from like current day production pipelines, right? So I guess there is some sense of truth in that. Is texel density also dynamic? It changes depending on the camera automatically in engine. So in a weird way, the reason why I have to think about this, in a weird way it is, but it isn't considered to do that by design, right? Like texel density is there to get you consistent texture resolution across a variety of props from different sizes, right? So that's the core functionality of texel density, is getting you consistent resolution across all surfaces, no matter how intricate or like simple they are. What happens is that there is MIP mapping. So it's going to reduce the texture size depending on the distance to the camera it is, or the screen size, or whatever it may be, right? There's a couple of ways that gets done. So technically, it is changing the texel density of those more distant assets, but it's not considered to be that way, right? it's not ever explained as in like, oh, we have like dynamic texel density that goes out of like distance. It's like, no, we optimize texture sizes over distance because that just makes sense, right? Because the further distance you are from something, the less you care about like the in-depth details, right? So yeah, what changes over distance is your texture resolution, not your texel density in that case. Connor Kenway is saying we always have this debate in our studio regarding texel density when it comes to tiles, bricks, or similar. Interesting. Well, what kind of conversations? I mean, obviously keep an NDA in mind. Because yeah, I mean, texel density should. Oh, here's also another important thing. People seem to be getting this wrong, especially when texel density first comes onto the scene. It might seem like a very, very weird thing to wrap your head around, right? And then what I see people do is over-index on, hey, our texel density is like 1K per meter. Everything needs to be exactly 1K per meter, regardless of any external factors, right? Not true. Filling out your UVs is more important than trying to stick to your texel density, right? So if your texel density is going to be, let's say, 800 pixels per meter or 1,300 pixels per meter, that's fine. We're trying to. It's not like a rule that everything needs to be like 1,024 per meter, right? It makes no sense. We need to have some flexibility in that system, which then means that one asset might be like 800, one asset might be like 1,200, as an example, right? As long as we have some sort of measurement that dictates like, hey, this is the target texel density, and the closer we get to it, the better we are, that's good. Because yeah, I don't want to see like, like 20% like UV wastage when it comes to just like, well, it was texel density, so I hit it, but then I had to waste like a bunch of resources because now I'm not using like 20% of my UVs, which is, yeah, wasteful. Awesome. Okay, let's dive into the next portfolio then. Texel density is a very interesting topic, I think. Depends on what you're into, I guess. Because here's the thing, texel density, it can be a very interesting topic, but then actually the way that you interact with texel density is just you press a button and that's it. So it's like from actually like the interesting part about it is that we have like a measuring tool to keep like resolution consistent across the board, depending on like a 2D interpretation of like a 3D thing, right? Which is like really interesting that someone came up with like how to measure that and all that kind of stuff. But then on the opposite side, like the way that we interact with it as artists is just like, hey, this is my texel density, type in the numbers, press a button, and you're done. And maybe you scale things a little bit, right? So yeah. Okay, let's dive into the next portfolio. Ludmila wants to boost my skills as a 3D environment artist and find a full-time job. Okay, let's go. That is cool to hear. So in Dublin, Ireland, variety of my skills include high poly, low poly modeling, sculpting, UV mapping, texture baking. Uh-oh. Why is that in quotes? I am already scared. Why? That is so worrying. Why is that worrying me so much that it is in quotes? PBR texturing, lighting, rendering, 3D concepting, and level art. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at your links that you added here in your about page. Cool. Facility-based rendering. Most of this is very straightforward, right? Freelance, self-employed. You got your resume here. That's awesome. So let's open that. The only thing that sucks about this is I don't know how this works, right? So this is me just throwing an idea out there. Can you upload a PDF? Because right now I can't click on the links, right? So I don't know if that's a feature on like LinkedIn. I've not tried this myself, but I hope that you can upload like a PDF to click on this stuff. All right, CV time. Let's have a look. Cool. This section is good. 3D environment artist and level artist in the games industry. That's okay. Ireland. You can probably say Dublin, Ireland, to make it somewhat more specific, so that if I know that I'm looking to hire you like in Ireland, I don't need to look up where specifically, right? I know that you have it on your like LinkedIn, but being specific to the city could definitely help me being like, hey, we're from Dublin, let's go. You got your LinkedIn, ArtStation, Sketchfab, that's good. Professional summary. 3D environment artist creating game-ready assets, modern environments, and stylized props for indie and AAA titles in Unreal and Unity. Ooh, interesting. In Unity. Okay. I'm curious if that is going to be proven on your portfolio. Skilled across the full pipeline. M dash. Sign of AI. Oh no. I honestly don't mind. What I tend to do is whenever I'm doing like any AI like rewrites, I just remove the M dash or like at least rewrite some of the stuff myself, right? I don't know if that's just the way that you write. I don't care that much. So concept and block out through high poly sculpting, low poly modeling, UV, unwrapping, PBR texturing, lighting, and in-engine integration. Strong focus on performance optimization, LODs, textile density, draw calls, and Nanite-ready workflows. This stuff, it kind of leads up being like very generic, right? Like a lot of this sentencing kind of feels like a lot of people are writing that. Maybe there's a way of making it more personalized. You know, like maybe you can tell me how you've done that, or like what is like an example of how you've done this in a project that you worked on. You know, like make it a bit more personable. Comfortable working from concept art, photo references, AI references, or technical specification, and collaborating across remote teams. Again, pretty generic. You know, I think everyone is going to be putting that on their resume because they're like, hey, look, I'm comfortable working from anything. And then I also love working in a team, collaborating across remote teams. Maybe, yeah, because remote is more of an outlier. Maybe that could be interesting to keep. Because basically what you're saying here is comfortable working from concept art, photo references, AI references, and technical specifications. Does that mean that you're not comfortable with working from if I give you nothing? Because that might also be the case, right? Sometimes if you list a bunch of options, that is going to have the other party focus on the thing that you didn't mention rather than the things that you did mention, right? So sometimes it's better to not mention it at all because that's going to be the base assumption for people. Arba Mila is saying, here in Ireland, the indie game industry is quite small, so I'm mainly exploring opportunities across Europe and the US. Since many studios prefer on-site roles, I can hope only for remote opportunities, just a few companies. Yeah, what I would say then is saying what you can do is saying like whatever you notice like Ireland, you can then say like willing to relocate, or maybe you're not willing to relocate. I don't know if that was like a part of your thing, but open to remote freelance roles, right? Like make it immediately appropriate for, let's say I'm a company, I'm looking for you, make it immediately appropriate. Like, hey, this is where I live. You can hire me locally or you can hire me remote. I'm open for those two things, right? So, oh yes, my beautiful hand drawing with the mouse. But that can be added, right? And then you can start linking things together, right? If let's say you prefer to work remote or you want to work on site, you then start adapting your professional summary to link more into those things, right? If let's say you can only work remote, you then double down on what makes you unique and how you've worked remote in the past, right? If that is the thing that you can do, right? So try to convince me already, like how you work remote and like what do you specifically bring to the table in a remote team compared to not being able to relocate, right? But try to always put like a kind of like a positive spin, right? Like, oh, here's what I'm good at, and here's how I thrive in like with situation that I thrive in, you know. Core competency: 3D environment arts, modular asset creation, hard surface modeling, PBR texturing, tileable and trim sheets, UV unwrapping, texture baking, blah, blah, blah. Iterative pipelines, environmental storytelling. Cool. Software: Blender, Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, Substance Designer, Substance Sampler, Adobe. Okay. One thing that I prefer here is you can name me a bunch of things, but I know already that you're not going to be as good in Blender as you are in Maya, or vice versa, right? So I need you to tell me, hey, I work in Blender every single day. But if you want me to, I can also work in Maya, right? Because we try to reduce friction as much as possible, right? So if you tell me, hey, Blender's my daily driver, that's sort of the way that I wrote it down on my CV, is like, this is what I do on a daily basis, and this is what I can and have used professionally in the past, right? So that I instantly know, like, oh, you're really good at Blender? Awesome. This seems to be a repeat of some of the stuff in here. Engines, UE5, Nanite, Lumen, custom shaders, Unity, Asset Pipeline. If you're doing stuff like this, try to make it more appropriate, right? Like, what kind of materials have you built? I mean, that is more a question for like your portfolio, right? But let's say, how did you do like draw call optimization, right? Draw call optimization by reducing unique instances of materials and improving reuse between assets or something like that, right? Give me some examples of that, because otherwise you're just like giving me a list, but none of that is like directly correlated to actually what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So you want to make that actionable. Make action. It's a horrendous drawing. Professional experience. Cool. Here's another thing. Professional experience. Love it. What you're basically saying to me now is that this is important, this is also important, this is kind of important, and this might be important. We need to shift these things around, and maybe personal summary, condense that down a bit. Immediate professional experience, and then tell me about like what skills you've done and how you've done them, right? Because I would even consider these two things. I would even consider merging that into this list, and then give me more examples and expand on this section rather than just listing out a list of skills that you can do, right? And then at the bottom you have softwares, daily, and then occasional or something like that. You know, it doesn't have to be those two stupid words that I just came up with. But just give me an indication of that. And then maybe give me some additional skills too, right? But yeah, just rejigging your CV so that it's more appropriate to like what you want people to see first, and what is more convincing for the other party to look at your portfolio, right? Unfortunately, not willing to relocate, so only remote or on-site in Ireland. That's fine, you know? Just immediately hit us with that on the CV, so that if I'm looking to hire you, then I know that like, oh, this person is only looking to work on-site in Ireland. Okay, unfortunately, we'll have to skip it. Or, oh, they already live in Ireland? Awesome. Let me just reach out to them, right? Cool. Yeah, I hope that this was helpful. A little quick overview of the CV, and let's dive into the rest of it, because we were kind of rounding this off. So you have your link to your portfolio, your resume. Awesome. That's perfect. Let's have a look at some of this other stuff. 3D environment and level artist. That is good. Made shaders for landscapes. Nice. Yeah, let's see. Might be the same sort of feedback that you can give here, right? It's creating 3D props and environments for multiple projects, following project goals and style guides. Very broad, right? What kind of props? What kind of environments, right? Because what I'm reading here, let's say I'm making a game and I'm making a city, and I need someone that is like pretty good at like architectural stuff, right? I am then looking for a person who can then also do those things. And if you then hit me over the head with like, hey, I've built like really in-depth like architectural kits that like fully work like in a modular way, that's awesome, right? Because that's what I'm looking for. Whereas some of this stuff reads a bit more generic, right? And especially with this, you're trying to show off what you've done ideally in like a professional setting, right? So yeah. Like yeah, gloat a bit about yourself, right? Like present yourself as like, hey, look, I can do all this awesome stuff. This is what I've done before. And if you want to have proof, go and look at my portfolio. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have a quick look here. When was this posted? 2 years ago. And then this is 3 years ago. Just some blockouts and silhouette stuff. Yeah. If you add this as a link, I think that's fine. I would honestly keep some of this stuff more personal and don't link it on your ArtStation. Because what that immediately does is I can see that this stuff here is from a way different caliber. From a way different caliber than what you present yourself on your portfolio, right? Not necessarily that this is necessarily that bad, but I know what platform you use to like maintain your active skills, which is ArtStation compared to this, right? So don't use Sketchfab. I mean, if you don't use Sketchfab, just don't have it as a link. And if you have fun with like personal projects and all that kind of stuff there, that's totally fine. But again, try to lean into what gives you the best possible impression if I'm going to look at your portfolio, right? A bit unsure in which direction within environment art I should prioritize. I enjoy several areas: modular architecture, vegetation, texturing, and sculpting, but I understand it's difficult to focus on everything all at once. I appreciate your advice on which skills and areas are currently the most in demand. I'm gonna flip the script on that a little bit, because I think looking at what is most in demand in the industry is a pragmatic way of looking at it, right? But what that doesn't take into account is what you actually love to do. Because I can tell you that like if you look at what is out there as like, especially if you focus on AAA jobs, right? Most of the jobs that you're going to be seeing are just going to be environment artists that can do a little bit of modeling, can maybe do a little bit of texturing, but then the majority of it is just going to be storytelling, composition, and all that kind of stuff, right? Because if you think about it, most AAA games, what they need you for is just making the environment feel like it's lived in, right? The scale and the scope of just like open world AAA games demands this. But that is possibly not the best way for you to focus on things if, first of all, you don't care about that stuff, right? And yeah, I think while pragmatic, it is just missing the point of like, hey, this is what I really like to do. Because here's also the other thing, right? When I look at like a lot of profiles out there, right? A lot of ArtStations. Usually what we notice subconsciously in the beginning I can immediately tell what you love to do and what you don't love to do, right? Because even between like all the things that we see here, there is more care in certain elements of your portfolio compared to other elements in your portfolio, right? And this applies to everyone's portfolio. Sometimes that means that you put more time and effort into like individual props or more time and effort into assets, right? For me, it was always like I don't care about like an individual prop. I just want to make like bigger, cool shit, right? So that meant that my priority has always been on using technical tools to work smarter, using trim sheets, using tilables, all that kind of stuff, right? That's what I focus on. But that was born out of just me loving that the most, you know? And again, while it might not be like a pragmatic way of getting into this industry necessarily, it does help you in carving out a niche for yourself, right? Because let's say people come to me not for like the arts, not the individual art of like an individual asset, right? They come to me because I've honed my skills into making like bigger stuff quicker with really cool storytelling, and I know like all the different pipelines and stuff, right? That's what I'm really good at. And yeah, that is something that you have to carve out for yourself. And if that aligns with what you want to do, that is more sustainable in the long run. Because otherwise, what you're going to get into is, cool, I'm going to chase what is in demand right now, even though it doesn't align to what I want to do, right? Let's say, for an easy example, let's say props, right? You become a prop artist, you work at like an outsourcing company making really cool props, but actually you never really wanted to do props in the first place. So now what you have to do is you have to spend 8 hours a day working on props and then a couple of hours like each week to then carve out a niche for yourself because you wanted to do like something else, right? What do you think? Where's a higher chance to find a job, environment art or level art? Well, here's the conundrum with that question. Environment art and level art is most of the time not even considered to be separate. The bucket of environment art is very confused, while companies are very confused what to do with the environment art bucket. So usually what happens is that a company will call it like environment artist because you are focusing more on the world than anything else. But even then, that can mean that you'll be doing foliage, you'll be doing rocks, you'll be doing terrain, you'll be doing level art, you'll be doing set dressing, you know, like all those things can be true. So what you'll oftentimes see is even if there is like an environment art application, in the application itself, it will be specific about the responsibilities that you will be doing, and that is what your niche is going to be. But yeah, what I will say is if you keep doing like more environment art stuff, you know, you do the study you're doing here, right? We'll dive into like a little bit into a little bit of this in the beginning. Like doing all the study you're doing here is going to land you that environment art job because it's a little bit of everything in it, right? But it is still focusing on the bigger picture, if that makes sense, right? Right. We can probably circle back on that to the end. Let's actually have a look at your portfolio then. Individual assets, prop work. Metal roughness, normal topology. Yeah, this is interesting. This is getting into like a good way of presenting it. I've never liked those like directional cutouts though, because they don't show the full thing for what I want to see, right? So have a lineup, maybe a bit smaller, but show me all the things in detail when it comes to these breakdowns. But I think fantastic job on like the texturing. I think the texturing feels really nice. The presentation of it is really well done too. We're getting some like nice like color variation, not color variation, like roughness variation in certain angles. I would love to see more of this kind of stuff where you see like the roughness kind of really take hold, right? Like exaggerating some of that stuff. But yeah. That's this. Is that just like that just broken ArtStation stuff happening here? What's happening here? Cool. Also notice one thing. I just done it subconsciously. If this top video doesn't autoplay, most people don't even click it. So I think this works great because it autoplays. This needs to be turned into like an auto-playing video, because I think I would, if I were to bet, I think 70% of people don't click on this. They will just scroll immediately. Well, 70%, I would even go higher, like 80% of recruiters or people that are looking at your portfolio for job opportunity reasons, they're not going to click on this. It takes too much time. Yeah, that's good. I love that you, even your older work, high quality bar, attention to detail is there. Really good to see. What is happening here? It's doing that. Is that like an ArtStation issue? Is that just like an empty thing here? I think it's just ArtStation fucking up, no? That's so interesting. I don't know why is that is happening. Huh. Anyway. So yeah, good presentation. Nice lighting. Good texturing. Robert Hooke's microscope. I wanted to create an accurate model to combat dark specimen images. Concentrated light onto the specimens. That's cool. What I think could push this like way further is you were telling me what it is here, which is cool. It would have been really nice. Oh, Marmoset Viewer should be where you can see all the textures. Interesting. I don't know why that is like broken. Does it work on your end, Mila? Just curious. What I was saying here though is that you're explaining a bunch of cool stuff. What I would try to do is whenever you're building something cool and it has like a nice cool story attached to it, I do not want to read it from the description. I want to visually be able to tell by looking at it, right? So it's show, don't tell. Everything that's in here is cool, like the background about it. Give me some juicy stuff to look into, you know? Maybe because of ad block. Maybe that would be the first time that it got blocked though. Huh. I don't know. Weird. Yeah, Will was actually gonna go into what I was gonna bring up next. Even if I can't see the Marmoset Viewer, a couple of reasons as to why not using it is, first of all, again, friction, right? I need to click on it, I need to wait until it to load, then I need to click on like a couple of things, and then I can look at the textures, right? What you're doing there is you're putting a bunch of like friction into the process, where honestly what you can do is just showcase those textures by themselves separately, tell me all the things that I need to know in an image. Way more effective way of giving me all the information without putting like a bunch of like roadblocks in the way for me. Yeah, and then also to add to it, what Will is saying, don't use Marmoset Viewer. People can steal your models and sell it. I don't think that ever got fixed actually. So I think that is still a thing that people can do. Which yeah, I don't think, I mean, do a lot of people still do that? Probably. There's still like a market of just like fucking annoying people that still do this shit. But that might be like another reason. Cool. So a bunch of optimizations there. Like I said, I do like the presentation of it, the way that you light things up. The texturing is pretty good as well. Like it. As for the breakdown, give me more to look at. As in full wireframe, the poly count of it, the texture sizes, all the textures used, you know? yeah, nerd out, you know, like show me all like the nerdy technical stuff that I wanna see. Sorry. That's incredibly messed up. Yep. People will do anything. People will do anything to just make a quick buck, you know. I can almost guarantee you that a lot of the resources that I've built and actually asked like a little bit of money for, they have, or even not even the resources, like even like some of the asset packs that I've built myself or have made with like other people, they're all just ripped. Someone bought it, put it on there for free, or just stole it and like broke a database or whatever. Yeah. That is unfortunately just the nature of the internet. And we were talking about it before, right? Where someone's work, literally, they just ripped all the images, copy pasted the description, and then pretended that it was their work on their ArtStation. It's dumb. Dumb stuff. But yeah, so really cool looking props there, Mila. I think that's really, really nice. Really well done. And I think that's also giving me, okay, you can do the individual props. It kind of looks really nice, but they look really nice. I know that you know your stuff when it comes to high total poly, texturing, all that kind of stuff. So all that's really good stuff. I still want to see more breakdowns and all that kind of stuff, right? But even just by looking at those images, I'm getting a good sense of what you can do. Game ready building for Astrum Entertainment. My task was to create an old industrial building. I developed my own concept by gathering references, blah, blah, blah. I decided to create a mini location to showcase the asset. Is this professional work? For Astrum Entertainment? I'm assuming that it's professional work. So what I would do with professional work is get a logo. You know, instead of the Unreal Engine logo, get the logo from the company or something like that and showcase it as professional work. And then maybe even like on all the images, get like the company logo and then just like, I don't know, a little bit of a banner, right? The reason why is that you want to showcase and you want to signal that this is professional work, because that does a couple of things to me. It means that you have professional knowledge, right? Which is awesome. And it also means that you had to work within certain restrictions of like an actual pipeline. Because my criticism without knowing that could be that I expect like a lot more detail to happen and a lot more blending between surfaces and all that kind of stuff. But you kind of have a little bit more freedom, or a little bit, my scrutiny is going to be like a little bit more lax when it comes to professional work because you're working within performance restrictions. The entire building was unwrapped into 2 UV max for unique texture. The first one covers the walls, and the second one is the concrete parts. Oh, okay. Okay, so you're doing like UV layering, right? So the first is just like tidables and trims and all that kind of stuff, and then your second layer is where you add like all the unique detail on top of it. Okay, that's cool. RGB masks for tightening textures by using the second UV set. Hello, Arvid. Yes, but it was unpaid. It was kind of practice in a company, and I couldn't use their logo as far as I understand. Yeah, that sucks. I used a custom shader provided by the company. That is so weird. Like, yeah, that is weird. Like, if... Okay, I'm gonna speak my own mind here for a second. But let's say if you are a company and you don't have the financial capability to like pay people to do like an artist for you, right? And we looked that through the fingers a little bit because I know that like small developers have a rough time with that, right? Please just let them use their logo. Let them present it as like professional work. You know, this is my thing to like those companies that are doing it. It doesn't cost you anything. Let them use your logo. Let them be proud of it, you know? And at least that showcases the company and the work in a good light. Yeah. Interesting. But yeah, some cool stuff being showcased here. That's pretty cool. Right, and then we have this one. That's the breakdown. So let's see. That was an art challenge, right? Cool, cool, cool. Let's have a look. This is a tiny for them it was a free asset. For me, it was real experience, so I needed to work for free. Yeah, I mean, while I don't like the practice, I mean, I still know that it exists, and for some, sometimes it makes sense. I personally, I'm not a fan of it, but I know that depending on the culture and like all that kind of stuff, like it. So won't someone think of the poor corporations? Well, I'm thinking that if you are, let's say, if it's like a company of like 2 people trying to make their first game, and then they want to hire like a third person, let's say, that's sort of situation that I'm imagining, right? If it's like a company of like 50 people, then yeah, just fucking pay people, Again, I don't know the size of the scale of the company, but hey. 2 comments actually here, Mila. When you're doing logos, try to keep the logos like pretty small. I think even smaller than this is fine. Like try to keep them like pretty small. And what I would also add is your name somewhere, right? It can honestly be something where let's say, oh my god, that's so thick. So let's say here you have Veiled Realms and then Leartis logo, and then here is going to be like your name and then your outreach information below it, right? Something like that, where like your connection information is actually like linked into some of the images. That if I were to save this, or I will send this to know my name, unfortunately. What the fuck? Like, honestly, this pisses me off so much. I have to really resist the urge of like going into like a fucking rant about this stuff. I think that's fucking disgusting, though. For the longest time, I haven't agreed with like a lot of their practices that they're doing. And if you're doing an art challenge, let people add their names to the fucking art that they created. Like, honestly, like have the common decency to like showcase the artist behind the work. Like, honestly, this is fucking disgusting. For the longest time, I'll be open about this. Like, for the longest time, I have steered people away from like working with artists for like monetary and business reasons, right? Because I think the deals they were giving people are not good. I'm assuming if you are doing a challenge that is free, that you put your hard work into, and then they tell you to not put the names on your own art, fuck off. Like, honestly, that's so disgusting. Fucking hate it. I think it's because like there's a prize pool involved, right? That's no excuse, by the way, but that's probably the argumentation that they used. What even is like the prize pool? Oh, I honestly can't be bothered to read this. Honestly. That's so disgusting. I am furious about this stuff. Anyway. The prize pool is the ability to use their assets. Yeah. Andrea saying this is the exploitation and I hate people taking advantage of artists like that. Yeah, 100%. And that is exactly what it is. For the longest time I've said this. Like, unfavorable deals. They try to get your assets for cheap as well and then sell them on like their own marketplace and then make like a shit ton of money. I don't know what the current deal is But one of the deals that I knew about is that you would get like a certain percentage for like, let's say 6 months, and then they would get like full royalties from it, right? So you wouldn't even like earn money. And they have my work now, and if I want to sell it, I need to... That honestly pisses me off so much. Okay, now knowing this, I am actively gonna steer people away from like doing this stuff for the artists. Like honestly. Like honestly, I'm gonna actively work against this. I've always been like a fence sitter when it comes to these topics, right? If you're doing this disgusting like behavior, like I'm just done. Here's the reason. Like I've always believed that, like, especially with our challenges, for example, right? And I can get that there's like complications that like when you're trying to balance the business between like what you're trying to offer people, right? I can get it. However, even with our challenges, we do not claim to have like ownership of their projects. And we've had situations where people have just no royalties to us been able to sell their work. Because I believe that if they put in the heart... So here's the thing, right? Like even if I am a mentor for a team and I put in like an hour a week, that doesn't give me like ownership. Or like even if I put on like the forums and I host like the challenge myself, that doesn't give me ownership of the work, or it shouldn't. Even though you can do that stuff, right? I don't think that is ethical to do, because you still have people putting in like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make something from scratch themselves, right? So yeah, there can be a deal, right? If you strike a deal with them and you say like, hey, look, your asset or like your packet has been selected for, I don't know, being able to sell on the marketplace, that's fine, right? And do like a revenue split or something like that, and then you can negotiate favorable deals. But yeah. That is fucking disgusting. I can't sell this work because I submitted it to the challenge. Yeah. It is honestly having respect for the people. Oh, this fucking pisses me so much, right? Because they are trying to build a company that is trying to literally steal your work. Right? God. Yeah, I don't want to keep rambling on this because that's not the point of this, right? The point here is to help you get better and to help you get like actionable advice. But yeah, I'll just say again, like that is fucking disgusting behavior, the artist. Like that is disgusting. Yeah. Have some decency, honestly. I hate this cycle of like the industry is already like hard enough to get into and is already can honestly already be somewhat exploitative to a certain degree, right? And then you have like other companies just coming in and making it even worse for people that are just desperate and trying to look for any opportunity to upskill, and then they're doing this shit. No, that's just, yeah. Anyway. Let's turn it to a positive, because Devil, you were asking, are there any challenge sites that you would recommend if you are a beginner? I know your challenges are aimed more towards people with experience. Yeah, honestly, like seeing this stuff happen, like seeing this behavior, like honestly makes me want to host more challenges that are just free and yeah, some sort of thing there. Like even for beginners, right? Because I think the goal of their, if you have the goal of, hey, we want to have people like do a challenge, and then if you get picked, then you get access to like the seller marketplace and all that kind of stuff. There can be a awesome win-win situation there. It's just they decide not to. Yeah. Why a one-way contract sucks? Yeah. But that's good to know. I thank you all for highlighting that, because that is even more vile than I already assumed it was going to be. So yeah, I do not like that at all. Anyway, let's go back to the project here, right? So, okay, disregarding like the logo placement and all that kind of stuff. What I was going to say next is you have your work and you have a breakdown. What I would say is you can combine them into one project. And this is more for like future projects, right? I wouldn't do this like now. But yeah, combine them into one thing. Because the stuff that I'm seeing here is cool. But in terms of like volume, I'm not really worried about it, right? So you can honestly just keep this one post because it shows like all the cool beauty shots that you've done, and then turn it into one post. Maybe there's some like contractual restrictions here. I don't know. But yeah, that's more like portfolio advice for you, right? Let's actually have a look at some of the breakdowns. Landscape created in Gaia, landscape master material, landscape master material function. Some cool materials. Again, I'll say this again, like I'm not a fan of these like materials, even though this looks like really pretty. And this is probably like the best presentation that I've seen, and I can get some sort of knowledge from this. I honestly prefer this more because you're showcasing the results of what the shader can do rather than the boring stuff that the shader is doing, right? So focus more on, and I'm looking at this from like a perspective of engagement, right? Because this is more engaging because you're showcasing what the tool is doing rather than just a simple image like this. Small stuff, yeah. Rock sculpting is looking nice. Sculpted statue. What could be interesting is showcase high poly, low poly textured version, right? So that I can kind of see all the stages of like a single asset, and I can see what pipeline you took. Well, not the pipeline you took, but like all the different stages of the asset, right? Trim sheet texture, block walls, yeah. But like the breakdown here is awesome, right? Like all this stuff. The only thing that I really have to say about this is really scrutinize like what you're trying to showcase and try to showcase it in the most engaging way as possible, right? I was thinking about it, but I don't want to combine it into one because I can post my breakdown without their logo. I was asking the permission to it. Yeah, I assumed that it was going to be like shenanigans like that. Okay, keep it like that. That's fine then. Cool. Okay, so we talked about your work. Let's have a look at what was good, right? So, we had a look at your prop work. The prop work is good. What I was missing there was just some like additional storytelling, right? I think that's a way to like elevate what you're doing already. I think the individual texture quality, the asset quality itself, and you know the modeling is of high quality. Now it just becomes more about like, okay, how can I integrate like more storytelling into this? And then the same thing with environments, right? Like, I think this one, because it was for a test, restrictions, this is for a challenge, you're restricted. What I really want to see is, okay, go smaller, make a smaller environment, but bring something to the table that is fully you, right? Like, what would you do if you had carte blanche, basically? And I want to see like what you can bring to the table as an artist yourself, right? Yeah, that's what I would focus on. Hold on, let me just send a message here. Okay, so yeah, that's what I would focus on going forward. Yeah, I want to see what you can bring to the table and use all these like interesting techniques that you've learned to try and make something that tells a story and that is probably smaller scale but like higher in quality, right? Because I mean the stuff that I'm seeing here, and you're giving me a glimpse, like if I have to scroll down like a little bit, where was it again? Was it all in the breakdown? I think it was, right? Yeah. Yeah, you're giving me a glimpse at like using very interesting techniques Um, you know, like you're combining SpeedTree, you're explaining me like how you use SpeedTree. The presentation can be like leveled up just a little bit, but like the thought process behind this is really interesting, right? Hey, I decided to create vines in SpeedTree. I ran into these issues. This is how I solved them, and this is like the path that I took, right? Awesome. The only thing that I would say with that is it is really buried under like a lot of stuff that is potentially like less interesting. So, from a broad sense, the focus is always going to be quality, right? That means make a smaller scene, focus on the quality and the storytelling. But the same thinking can also be applied to the individual ArtStation posts, where I would probably want to see less images and less stuff in general, but higher quality stuff overall. Right? So really taking your time and really thinking about like, okay, what do people want to see? Most of it is really good, like modular asset pack, good to see. But let's say for some of these bigger assets, right? Maybe it's more interesting to then do a showcase where you show the statue. Where is it again? The statue just by itself, and then you just showcase the statue with the base titleable, and then you add the RGB masking on top, and then you add like the additional details with the folders on top of it, right? And then next to it, you have a breakdown of like all the textures you've used to make all that stuff up. Yeah. And that's like a more efficient way of presenting everything, because now I can just look at one image, I know exactly how you've made it, and I know exactly all the game art stuff that kind of went into making it, right? And that's a sort of condensation of condensing of information that I'm really a fan of, because then it becomes way more dense, but every little bit is just like filled with like really good stuff, right? Because it could easily, this post could easily be, let's say, 10 images in total, but all these images could be like fully packed with like all the cool stuff that you've done, right? And that's what we should be focusing on. So if you have something where it's like, well, I'm just showing like Gaia landscape, is this the most interesting way of showcasing this? Maybe not. Will is saying that's a good shout. Mentioned it, but also a GIF can work, you know? Show each layer add on top of each other. GIFs are always like a good way of doing it. Or like short little videos, those autoplay videos, right? They're a short and good way of doing it. Because GIFs, they can get really... The only thing why I wouldn't use GIFs is because for... And even, this is not a bad suggestion, right? Like the only thing why I would prefer not to use GIFs is because it get like really heavy. And if you then want to like lower them down, usually you like make them lower resolution. So if you can turn that GIF into a video, like even if you have like a really heavy GIF and then you go and turn that GIF into a video with like Handbrake or something like that, like a little program that you can download, that might be a good way of doing that. And also it adds the benefit of now I can go to the frame where I want to stop the video and I can analyze it more thoroughly, potentially. But GIFs, not a bad suggestion. Cool, yeah. Yeah, making it more engaging. It's good. Devil, isn't there a way to select a few images and create a slider to move through the process? No, but there is a way to like easy GIF. You can just drag in like a couple of images and it makes a GIF for you. That's an easy way to do it. And this is like a website online, you know, right? You just throw like a couple of images at it. It makes a GIF for you. You're done. But yeah, really cool. So, okay, what do we talk about? So, your prop work is great, right? Like really showcasing like good attention to detail. Oh my god, attention to detail and texture quality. The Rookie Slider tool is amazing for that. Yeah, there's some cool tools. Like the Rookies has a good presentation for that. Yeah, where you can just like slide through. That's awesome. Unfortunately, ArtStation doesn't have that. Prop work is great, good attention to detail and texture quality, so that's good. Props have no qualities where you can like match like any given quality, right? But I assume that you don't want to be you don't want to be a prop artist, right? If you're going into environment art. So I would honestly leave the prop art a bit more and just focus on making cool, like smaller environments that can maybe incorporate some of the cool art, the cool prop art that you do, right? But yeah. So your environments can benefit from additional detail and storytelling, right? And the reason why I love storytelling so much is because if you want to tell a story, it's going to automatically try to force you more towards optimizing for smaller scenes because you're trying to tell something, right? So you're going to automatically bunch up and cluster stuff together. Resilient for dealing with a bad studio. Yes, that also stood out for the portfolio. And also my unbridled anger for artist exploitation stood out for me. Oh my god. I think probably that's... I'm not an emotional person, right? As you can tell. You've watched this stream like multiple times. But that is probably like the most like furious that I've been. I hate it so much. I'm gonna be reeling for that for like weeks. Like I can't believe that. Anyway, we're not going there again. Like I can't. Prop work is great attention to detail. Environments can benefit from additional detail and storytelling. Yeah, and like... I love Angry Tim. Yeah, you don't see him that often, you know? Stepping down to my level. Cool. So let's talk about the points here, Ludmila. So I think your techniques really good, right? Like showcasing, especially the environment art techniques. There were some like presentation stuff that you can improve, but honestly, I think you've got a good showcase for techniques. Artistry, love the props. Environments are good. I would then again go for more like higher quality, smaller things, right? And really focus on like blending everything together, and really going for that like textual detail, going for the storytelling, like all that kind of stuff. Still, you're not doing bad at all, right? You're in a really good position. So yeah, great stuff. Hireability is pretty good as well. And in a presentation, are we gonna go for 7 across the board? Is that what's happening here? Let's go for 7 across the board now. Let me think. So what is standing out currently? Yeah, okay. So artistry is gonna go up, and then we're gonna do something like this. Because presentation of the actual screenshots is good. I think you can still bring out like some of the environment, especially more with like more interesting lighting. I'm thinking about like cinematic presentation, and then also the presentation of your breakdown can be improved a lot, right? So I decided to go more into like, let's say, artistry, and then detract from presentation a little bit. But overall, really good stuff, right? I know that I'm a harsh critic, but you're doing really good. Yeah, the thing that I'm really most excited for is just what do you as an individual bring to the table, and what is your artistic voice, right? That's what I want to see. Build something small and like really just jam, like pack it full of like stuff that you want to tell, right? Show me what you can do. Cool. Thank you for submitting your work. I am also going to share your ArtStation as well, so that people can give a like, give a follow, all that good stuff. Because yeah, I mean, you're making cool shit. So it's going to be fun to like stalk you a little bit and see how you can improve over time. Okay, I'm going to have to cut this one short. But it was lovely to hang out with everyone. Let me switch for like a little outro. It was lovely to hang out with everyone. I do have a meeting coming up in just a minute here. So yeah, lovely hanging out. Thank you all so much for the support and for being here doing portfolio reviews. Again, for people that joined and you want to get your portfolio reviewed as well, become a member. You get like a bunch of cool stuff, a bunch of cool goodies, and you get your portfolio reviewed on on this stream as well. So yeah, join up, become a member, all that good stuff. And yeah, go support like the two artists that were in the stream today. Lovely work. And yeah, I'm just gonna say, have a nice weekend, everyone. See each other later.